might have two different people that are speaking about the protection of children. One of the biggest mistakes that humans have made is you guys all assume that you're perfectly rational people and that you evolved to seek truth, and you don't. The truth that we tend to seek is truth that makes us feel good. You argue against the experience machine?
I'm kind of into knowing if I'm a brain in a jar.
People on the left are often seen as having more diverse friend groups as people on the right, but that's only when you evaluate it from the paradigm of like what makes diversity from the left. Because if you look at like ideological conformity between the groups, they're probably very, very, very high.
We have evidence that AIs like put on the masks that they think they want us to see.
When it comes to AI and whether or not it would destroy humanity or not, what are the top 3 things that man can do to be better at sex?
I feel like they would absolutely reach out to you.
I think the lawyers will reach out to you. I'm not sure that I don't think you get like
Is it illegal?
It depends what you're doing.
I feel like they would try to go around, like they get you on like copyright for showcasing
For like
the logo or
branding,
something.
yeah. For like stealing.
Can you,
IP.
I guess you can't have brands.
Recording?
That cam, we're good?
Yeah, when you want, you can turn around and talk to it.
I don't know. I was clearly indicating that that's the one.
Introduce yourselves.
I'm Aella.
Hey, I'm Aaron.
What are you guys known for?
Sex
Oof.
stuff. Woof.
That's a big one. What are you known for? What would you say? What are the top 3 things?
There's
you think you're known
gnomes.
for? What?
There's some gnomes.
There are
Like
gnomes.
And I guess a birthday gangbang. Also studying sex and stuff.
Okay.
Also
do you-
not showering.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are you doing here? What's your relationship to all of this?
I am business married to Aella, but I'm known for the Tooth Juice Company and my science fiction writing.
I didn't know that you did science fiction writing.
I did it
Clearly
under a
you're
pen
not
name,
known for that.
So, hey.
Oh my
He
god.
got some fancy people
Oh.
I got some fancy people.
Do you have
being
like,
like, wow, your writing's really good. Yeah.
what's your favorite short story that you've written?
It's not so. Utopia Lol was nominated for the Nebula, and like Georgie R.R. wrote me a nice letter, but that's not actually my favorite. I think Truth Plus, which is about an asteroid annihilating all human life, and then a PR company that decides that the honorable thing to do is lie to everyone and say like, actually we're good, we got an escape rocket going, so humanity will persist.
Okay.
And the twist is there isn't one. They were just trying to make people smile in their last moments.
So the quandary is like, is that moral or immoral?
So it's basically romantic comedy. It's a real upper. Yeah, we try to inspire hope.
Are you going to talk about the other thing that you do?
Ooh. The other
Ooh,
thing.
Ayla put you on the seat.
I just forgot about it, but then I was like, that might be interesting. You don't have to. You don't have to. Okay.
Well, I'm
We
very
turn the
curious
camera.
now. And this show's going to be like 2 hours. So what is the... Just give me like what is it about?
Maybe live is not the time to make that.
We're not
God,
live,
she really
to be
put you on
clear.
the spot.
It's
My God.
monstrous. If you look up Tale of the Witch, it's a
Wait, do
tastefully
I know about... Is this the
understated-
thing that... at the event? That you were
Oh
talking
my-
about?
This is
Yeah.
awful. You're all
Oh.
the worst. Okay,
Oh,
now
you're
I'm
super
the
fucked.
one
Honestly,
that
everybody
doesn't
knows
know
about
what
that.
we're talking about.
Wait, do you still own that, or are you...
No, I still own that.
Oh.
I'm in the process of exiting that. But
Okay, cool.
Should I just act like yeah.
Yeah.
Today's show is sponsored by Ground News. Don't know if we're actually going to utilize much of Ground News today, but we'll see. It's my favorite app for getting news from. And you can use our promo code in the description below if you would like to sign up. We're also sponsored today by... Do you love Skillshare?
I love Skillshare.
Wait, Skillshare sponsors? Do they know about you, right?
What does that
What kind
mean?
of question is that?
I just if
Should
you
I
can't,
let them know?
if you have to make Skillshare very sweet and wholesome, I'm just like then I'm
Yeah, that's why
surprised.
she's here. Okay. You and I have a similar problem. Okay. Or maybe it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. On the internet, you are known for your research, and then that word means different things to different people, part of what we'll get into, because you want to take ideas, hypotheses that you have about sexual behaviors of people or other things, but mainly in that domain, and then you try to find ways to collect huge amounts of data, process it in some meaningful way, generate some kind of like meaningful conclusion, you write about it. Obviously, one of the biggest, or at least from what I've seen and what I've spoken with you about, one of the biggest things that happens to you online are people attacking the credibility of your research. And it feels like you're in this world where you don't have necessarily like the formal training to do these particular things, but you still feel like you can contribute meaningfully to it. And that's like a thing that you push in that direction. How do you sort out in your life, like, how do you get a gauge on what it is that you do? Do you ever worry as you're doing something that you might be completely full of shit, or that the world of academia is completely full of shit, or that people are giving you fair criticisms or not fair criticisms? Like, how do you navigate that world? Like, how do you test yourself to see if you're doing it in a responsible manner?
Yeah, I think there's this thing where I was like sort of outsourcing my judgments about what was good or not because I was looking for people with sort of sufficient veneer of authority. I'm like, oh, if you come in and go like, I know what I'm doing enough, like this tricks some sort of primal part of my brain. I think I'm getting better at not doing that anymore. Like, it's okay to not understand something. It's okay for something to not make sense and just be like earnest and eager. And so I look at people who just what they're doing makes sense to me, even if they're not like fancy people at all. And I'm like, okay, what you're doing, I can follow it, and this is convincing, and I'm going to ask you to like look at what I'm doing and then give me feedback. I actually have been, because a lot of our past conversations, I was like, how do I handle this criticism? It's getting to me. And I've actually come quite a long way since then. I think mainly because I started becoming more friends with people who were like similarly influential in the world to me. And then that just sort of evened out something psychologically. Like
it normalized it essentially of being like, oh yeah, we get all these like crazy criticisms, so yeah, it is what it is. Or
yeah, something like that. I think a part of me was like looking for social validation. Like, am I doing an okay thing, guys? Like, and then all of the people with credentials would be like, no, you're not. And I'd be like, I mean, a lot of them were saying I was doing a good job too, but you know, the internet's weird. But I think like some part of my brain was missing a nutrient where I needed people with some sort of power to validate me. And then once that happened, a lot of my like core paranoia fears started melting away. And now I feel like a lot better about it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. You think my research is bad? Like, whatever. Just read it and then tell me what the criticism is. And if not, then I kind of ignore it.
I feel like in my 20s, I feel like the goal was to kind of become knowledgeable about everything and to know everything, and that like your own mind would guide you in every way possible. And then as I've gotten into my 30s, I feel like the better skill is actually figuring out like, well, I know I can't do everything, so who can I trust to do things? Who can I trust as sources of good criticism or good sources of validation? Do you have things or like strategies that you use when you're doing stuff to make sure that you're not just like shopping for positive validation and ignoring legitimate criticism? Or I'm sure at some points you feel like you've probably been listening too much to criticism and not taking validation. Like, how do you balance out what's good and what's not?
I think like, I mean, a lot of the basic rationality virtues are in here. Like if somebody just really wants to know the truth, you can kind of smell this on somebody, right? Like somebody's like arguing for a thing and it's like somebody brings up a counterpoint and it's like, do they immediately shut down the counterpoint without like trying to be curious about what it is first? Like if you really want to know the truth about a thing, you stop and you like slowly process like, wait, what is exactly are you trying to say is bad about my thing? What are you writing down?
Don't worry about it.
I thought you said the
every time you
paranoia
say
has
something
decreased.
really dumb, I write it down here so I can post it after
Yeah,
that.
you can make like a bloopers reel at the end.
Yeah.
Or it's just like me talking, but
Every time you say a thing, if there's a thing that I think I want to respond to in the future, I usually
see.
take
That's
notes during debate. So I wrote down curiosity because I feel like curiosity is a really good thing that if you see it in somebody, there's like the mark of a curious person. Like when you're arguing with somebody, they'll entertain insane hypotheticals and they'll follow you like on all of these different conversational pathways because you can tell that they're genuinely curious and exploring something, as opposed to I don't know how much you argue with people, but sometimes you might be in a really big back and forth. You're like, okay, well, hold on. Let's assume for a second. Let's say that you have two parents and they tell you that you have to go to bed at 5 p.m. You probably wouldn't like that, right? And they'd be like, no, I think I would like that. Well, you can tell they're fighting against like every single part of an argument you're building because they're scared of where it'll go.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm talking about there? Yeah.
Right.
As opposed to like I've got a couple friends, Pisco lawyer guy, where we'll argue about like self-defense and we'll both be arguing over like, can you kill somebody who steps onto your yard and steals like a single blade of grass? Like, would that be ethical? And both of us will go to like the maximum exploration of that hypothetical. And it reminds me of the curiosity thing.
This reminds me of a stupid question I have. Maybe you guys already know the answer. This is really dumb to you, but I'm gonna give the question. Okay, so this is imagine. So sometimes you're like in the middle of the night, you go outside, you look up, and you see the crescent moon. So far, so good.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's like not full, right?
Yeah, it's just like a little crescent.
Okay.
Yeah, good job.
Thank
you.
So far, you're following.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Okay, so where's the sun in this scenario?
In the same spot that it usually is?
Okay,
Or
so
from
middle
whose
of
frame
the
of
night,
reference, yeah?
You're looking above your head, you see the crescent moon. That means that most of the light hitting the moon is from behind the moon. And only slightly to the side because you're seeing a small crescent.
Yeah, so the moon would be like, the sun would be in the direction of where the light is. Like if the crescent is like here, then the sun is theoretically like that way.
Okay.
So if it's in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
how is it possible? Because if the sun is in behind the moon, it should be daytime.
I don't think the sun would be behind the moon, no?
Well, if it's a crescent,
Wait, what does crescent mean?
like just a little bit of light around the moon.
It's like this.
My understanding is that if the Earth is here and you see a thing of the moon here, then the sun has to be back here, and it's the light that's making it like
Like we're only
basically
seeing
whatever
bits
you
of
don't see of the moon is just a shadow that the Earth is casting on the moon from the sun. No.
Yeah, that's an eclipse. So if the shadow of the Earth moves in front of it's like a lunar eclipse, I think, or something.
Well, that would be if it's completely and totally invisible, right?
Well, you can have partial eclipses. But are you saying that anytime you see a crescent moon, that the dark spot is part of the Earth's shadow?
The way you phrase
No,
that makes
it's
it
just
seem
the
like I'm
non-lit side of
retarded
the
for
moon.
thinking that.
No. So this question, when I first thought of it, made me feel completely retarded. But as I've asked it to more people, it's the process of answering the question becomes really fascinating to me. Like to me, it's less interesting if you know the answer and more like what.
I guess this would be my assumption. My assumption would be that if you only see like this part of the moon here, it's because the Earth is here and the sun is here shining light that's like illuminating this part
And
of the
you're
moon.
like-
Am I
Yeah,
totally?
that's an
there.
eclipse. So usually it's not quite.
That's an eclipse?
Well, if the Earth is blocking the light from the sun, then that is an eclipse.
Oh, so
Well-
the moon would be like here?
So the little dot is the moon, in his
In
thing.
his picture.
But
So
in
are
my
you saying
scenario,
the moon should be like more
in
like
my
this?
scenario, if you have the moon, and you see just a small sliver, this means that the light is hitting mostly the other side of the moon.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So then it would be like, so it would be more like the Earth is here, the sun is here, the moon is like here, and you're here, and then like the sun is like lighting up that part, and then you're
Right.
here and you see it. Oh,
You're
okay.
right, but in that scenario, it would be much more than a sliver. It would be like over half of the moon would be lit up.
Okay. Why? Yeah, everyone's looking at me. I'm getting.
Because you have the picture. That's why we're all looking at you.
This is probably pretty frustrating for people who can't see the picture.
We have cameras. Fuck you guys.
Great.
Yeah, but you were turned away from all three of the cameras.
Okay, well, give me a second. Okay, hold on. I haven't thought
Why
about
don't
this
you
before.
use a notepad?
Why would I use a notepad when I have a digital notepad?
Okay.
Okay, you look up into the sky
Yeah,
and you see the moon.
above your
okay?
head.
You look up into the sky above your head and you see the moon.
Yeah.
Okay, and the moon has only a small crescent lit.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two reasons why there's no light on the moon, and it's either because the Earth is blocking it, which is a type of eclipse,
Yeah,
which we're
but
not saying,
I'm saying it's not
or
that. Yeah.
the sun is just not shining light there. So if we're standing on planet Earth and then we see the moon and some little bit of area is lit here, then that would mean that the sun has to be off in some area where you can't see it because there's no sunrise, it's the dead of night, and then but it's hitting the moon, right?
Yeah, but if you're on the Earth, wait, what am I looking at?
Okay, sun,
Yeah,
Earth,
yeah.
me, the moon. So the moon is like tracking ahead.
I still
It's
don't
not an
understand
eclipse.
what the.
The moon is like over top, like it's orbiting in front of the Earth.
Okay, and so we should see about half the moon lit up in that case.
Half the moon in this case.
Because if you see the moon and half of it, that means the sun is in that direction. But if it's a sliver, that means the sun should be in that direction.
Is there like a
myself or the moon in this case?
well, we're on Earth, so wait, is there a hidden third source of light? Could it be like reflecting off the atmosphere from the
It's
planet?
no reflection.
It's always from the sun.
Yeah.
It's so interesting thinking about this because it makes me so my father-in-law's a flat earther, like a staunch
Wow.
flat earther, and it's always interesting talking to him because he'll have questions about how like God, I hope he never hears this conversation. I'm gonna get the answer from you so I can tell it to him. But he'd ask something like this, and I'm like, I have a hard time like mentally putting like space with like circles and orbits and like figuring out the trajectory of like where things like it's just a hard question to answer if you don't know what the answer is. But there is an answer. But he would like use things like this to be like, see, that's why the Earth is flat. And you're like, I know you're wrong.
What's the argument for
Yeah.
why the Earth is flat that's causing crescent moons?
I don't.
I
Yeah,
think that
I'll,
the,
do
This
you want
one
me to
is
call
pretty
him?
simple.
the curvature
Fuck.
suggests
Now I feel even more
more.
retarded. Can you give me a
it's-
hint? Point me in the right
I think-
direction.
no, see, like I think I'm gonna explain why I think this question is interesting afterwards. But after you like wallow
the
in the
moon
feeling of
here?
retardation, so if it's in the dead of night, you're going to be on the opposite side of the planet. Like for example, like you're looking at me and there's a window behind me, and this window is a source of light, and probably you can see, I imagine, some kind of like light right here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like that would be an example of like why it's a crescent. So the sun, the source of light, is behind me. You're nighttime looking at me.
Wait,
how
so
is
when,
it nighttime?
Yeah, but that can't be the case, right? Because that would be a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse.
I thought when the moon was in front of the sun, that's a
Yeah, but it's not
eclipse.
that, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, they're not like perfect. I don't actually know why sometimes there's an eclipse and there's not, but
Oh.
the answer is not an eclipse.
Oh, so it is kind of like in front. It's just I'm on the wrong side of the planet.
Well, I can't really tell what you're drawing. I want to. I have a thing.
Do you want to
Do
draw?
you wanna
A
draw?
little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Let me. Okay. So we have sun and earth, and it's nighttime, right?
Yeah.
So this is like the part of the earth that's lit, and this is the part that's not lit. So you must be like middle of the night. Let's say you're roughly right here, and you're looking upwards, and you're seeing the moon. The moon should be also lit the same way the sun is, and this part should be bright, which makes it a full moon. So how do sometimes you look up in the middle of the night sky, and why is it sometimes, if for a crescent, for example, I'm going to ignore this part. I'm just going to draw for a crescent, you'd have to, let me see.
Well, the moon, there's no solution where the moon is directly behind the earth, right? The moon has to be off,
Off to the
some
side
other,
or like in front to some degree. Like it has to be like.
right?
Yeah. So what's happening when you look up in the night sky and you see a crescent moon?
It has to be like on that, not like in a 90 degree from the planet or something, right?
Like somewhere like here or maybe in front, because if you're like here, then maybe the moon is like up in here.
Do you have the answer?
Yeah.
Give me a hint.
I don't know how to give you a hint. You're like on the right track or something.
Okay. We can edit this, okay? I have all fucking day, all right? Hold on. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Okay. So
So it's nighttime.
Is the picture that you drew a hint of how we should be
No.
thinking about drawing
Well,
a
this
picture?
is- this
'Cause
is
your
why it's
picture is
confusing,
fucking
okay.
because if you
no. So
if
we're
you-
here on the Earth, okay? We're here on the Earth.
where can you draw where we are on the earth?
Well, okay. The sun is over here. Okay. It's not going to be something stupid like we're on the edge of like sunrise or something stupid like that, right? That would be dumb, right?
Well, what I'm doing is that you can tell me that it is dumb and you think that that is the answer if you want.
But you see crescent moons everywhere. It doesn't really matter whether you're close to the equator.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
you're
Yeah, that's
not.
why I'm writing that off. So let's say that we're standing here.
In the middle of the night.
Okay.
Can you shade the side of the earth so that we know it's nighttime?
No, this is
Okay.
the sun,
Yeah,
so
well,
you
I
know
do-
this
okay.
is night.
All right,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, this is daytime down
I actually
here.
didn't
The
know. I
fucking
wasn't
sun
sure.
is,
He has
okay?
a policy.
Okay. So now we look up into the sky,
Yeah.
and we see a moon that is only partially lit. Now, if the moon was here, then we would be seeing a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
If the moon was,
That's what I'm saying. Like in here or like right straight ahead of us.
okay, so if the moon is over here, I'm trying to think of what you would see. Would this be a completely dark moon?
What you could draw a line shadow on the moon just like you did on the earth.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of like what you
That would be a half moon.
like. What would your visual
That would
thing
be a half. Up.
It would
It's
be
always
over a
kind of-
half moon.
This would be over half.
Yeah, because you can draw like a line with what you can see, like on the moon, vertically. Like if you're looking at a ball, something like that. Yeah, in that direction.
I'm not the best drawer. Okay.
Can you show the crowd, just so that they have an idea what's going on?
But you would probably see a little over half a moon. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it seems like the only variables that we have here is we can change where we're at on the planet, or we can change where the moon is between us and the sun. So it feels like the moon has to come down here or something.
Or be like up in here, like across this like ahead in front of the Earth.
I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't work like that.
Like orbitally, it just never.
I think actually no. I
What?
think so, right?
Well,
I
I
think
haven't played enough
regardless,
Kerbal
this is
Space Program.
that's not the answer.
Okay,
but
okay,
now
okay.
it is. I forget which axis. It's the axis of towards and away from the sun, I believe.
Sure. I know it's what is it called? Locked. There's a name for this. Gravity.
Oh, yeah.
Tidally locked. So you always see one side of it, but I don't know if that's not relevant to this. I don't know. I would imagine that the moon has to be like somewhere between like the sun and the earth, so you're only catching like
Okay.
a part of it.
So are you arguing that you can never see a crescent moon in the middle of the night? Is that your answer?
Should
Well,
we be
clearly
arguing
that's a rhetorical
that?
question
So-
that's meant to demonstrate
Yeah.
the fault in my logic somewhere, meaning
It's
that
not
there's no
necessarily.
way.
I'm trying to be as
Okay, so
neutral
you
as
can
possible.
only see
there
a
is an
crescent
answer
moon
here.
at sunrise and sunset.
No.
Do you want the answer?
I don't care.
Give me like 2 more minutes, okay? Give me 2 more minutes. Okay. First of all, let me check some. You can see a crescent moon in the middle of the night, correct? Is that true? I don't look at the moon. I live in a city
I
and I
don't
play
think
video
so.
games.
I'm trying to think.
I think I've seen a crescent moon.
You
At
have
night?
to wait. It's not a trick
it's like
question.
full blackout?
Can you?
You cannot.
Oh, you.
I think so.
No.
I don't care about the moon. cut this whole section.
No, but I want to
Keep it
explain why this
August.
question's interesting. So when I first thought of this, I was like camping. I didn't have internet access. And I was really confused by this question because I had a memory of the moon in the middle of the night. I was like, I remember this. How can this be possible? And I didn't question my memory at all. And so I was just really confused. I was like setting up flashlights and things and being like, this isn't possible. I don't understand.
So you only
And
see
but
crescents.
nobody suggested to me the possibility that I had a false memory, not a single person. And so I've gone around and I've asked a whole bunch of people this question, and it's interesting. So either people get confused in the way that you did, or people give me very confident answers. People will be like, oh, this is a very simple problem. We know how the moon and the sun operate. We learned about this in grade school. I'm supposed to be the kind of person that has a clear answer to this. And then they will just make up something and give it to me, and I'll be like, no, it's not that, and they just like won't hear it. And this is why it's one of my favorite questions, because either you're confused, which is the correct answer, or you happen to already know the answer, which is fine, or you're very confident.
My dad was that kind of person. I love him so much, but growing up, I don't know if it's a guy thing or there are women that do it too, but if you ask my dad any question, he will absolutely have with 100% confidence the answer for you, even if
Man
it
answering.
absolutely has no trace to reality whatsoever, which was very interesting.
Yeah.
But
I do feel like it's more common in like masculine, the way we socialize like masculine people though. Like I feel like more often when I experience like what I call like man answering, it'll be like kind of you confidently say an answer, even though you have like no f***ing clue. And it's like I do this sometimes too, but it feels like more socialized. Whereas like I feel like it's actually interesting. I feel like a more common like femme answer that we're socialized into is just like not knowing and then giving up. And like kind of feigning, like saying I don't know and also not attempting to know,
Right.
Which is like how we socialize, I think, women. So I call that like women answering, where you're just like I don't know, and you're like you could probably figure this out in like 2 seconds. You're like, can you just like help me?
Yeah. So when you're asking like what are the kinds of things that make somebody that like cause me to look to somebody for help and answers, it's like these two traits of both curiosity and confusion. Like I don't know the answer. I'm really confused by
so
this.
you just shit tested
And
us.
persistence.
Thanks.
Well, I figured
Okay.
you'd probably.
Yeah.
I've seen you work on like the portal problem or whatever before. I've given you like weird, weird thought experiments, and you handle it pretty well. But I think that's like it's a good demonstration. Like, are you approaching reality such that you are comfortable not knowing something that you feel like you should know, and are you willing to like keep working at the answer to figure out the things? So
Something that is really important, the idea of having particular tests is, I notice that a lot of people hang out in kind of more abstracted theoretical worlds when they talk about how to do a particular thing, but they don't ever actually give an example of it, and it makes me wonder if there's any application to their theory. So for example, I'm doing it right now, I'm giving an example. You might have two different people that are speaking about the protection of children, and both will say, we should do everything we can to protect children. It's important that they have the freedom to explore life in the way that they want to. We need to make sure that they're happy and healthy and that they're doing things that optimize their future. And then one guy says, that's why my child is homeschooled in a fundamentalist religious environment. The other person says, that's why my child has the right to take hormones at 12 years old,
Yeah.
right? Both of these people will say the exact same thing up until they hit the very end when they give their application, and they're worlds apart. They're not even in the same universe of understanding each other. Which is something that's very frustrating to me. Whenever I argue with people, I ask people things like, how do you make sure that you are, evaluating media in a critical way, or you're not being biased? And it's always the same answer. It's just read from a variety of sources. And it's like, okay, that's everybody says this. This doesn't mean anything. Give me an example of that. Having actual examples on how to, I don't like to call it like a shit test, but like having actual examples of like, how do I verify if somebody is giving me a good answer or not, or if I can evaluate their thought process, I think is really important. Because
why
people
don't you
just
like
say,
calling it a shit test?
because I just spent 2 years arguing with the red pillars, and there's a really negative like dating connotation
Association with shit testing. Yeah.
The reality is everybody should be shit testing people constantly, because if you're not, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah.
What do you actually? I'm super curious by that. So what do you mean people should be shit testing? Maybe just because I'm so red pill brain that I have such a negative association with it.
Even technically from the red pill world, women, everybody should be shit testing. If you, the problem with shit testing is that, never mind, actually, there's a whole lot. I think it's just because people are over entitled and they think that
It's just
Okay,
seeking to disconfirm your beliefs, right? It's just like, I'm giving you a test and there's a way to fail it.
yeah,
It's just-
basically. But
Possibly.
people act like shit tests are these unreasonable, like, oh, if I ask where we're going, you should suggest that we're going to a $600 per person restaurant and you should offer to pay everything. That's my shit test. When in reality, a shit test might just be a question of like, oh, like, how do you feel about your exes? And they say, every single ex I've dated is crazy. And I hate all of them. I don't any good. And it's like, oh, okay.
Oh,
Well,
so when
fuck
you say
them.
shit tests, they're like flag tests essentially, where
Yeah.
you're like asking people questions where the answer, there isn't an answer that's correct, but there is definitely answers that are incorrect that would be concerning.
You're asking things that people don't realize are giving really huge insights into their character. Even the
Have
lack
nothing
of
to do with
realization
what
is a
they're
shit
saying.
test in and of itself. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I have heard relationship advice around like just thou shalt not test, but I don't know if that's applicable really. It's kind of old. It's kind of the old way of burying your problems.
Oh, I see. Like burying the hatchet. Because the main way I've heard of shit testing is where like girls will talk about it of like you give a guy a boundary, like you say no to him about something. You don't actually care about him not doing this thing, and it's kind of arbitrary. You just want to see like if he'll respect it. And I've always been like, I would just like have natural boundaries and say no like then, and then see how he reacts. Like that. But maybe this is just a different type of shit test that we're talking about.
I find I subconsciously shit test people all the time. I don't notice I'm doing it. Just afterwards, I'll be reflecting on that thing. I'm like, why was I so prickly? I'm like, oh, I was like doing some pokes very intuitively just to see the way that they respond under pressure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So like you would antagonize them like a little bit intentionally, or say something that you think will ruffle their feathers.
Yeah, like
For
a
a reaction?
bit, just sort of like what are you made of? Like, I'm on a date with you. I'm gonna like figure out what your edges are, and a lot of that is some sort of poking.
How do you not feel like that's very interesting when I was like talking to you before about how I try to understand people. I always want to do things like that, but I would always feel nervous poking at them too much in a way that's going to make them like uncomfortable.
Do you have an example?
Not one that's immediately coming to mind, but like asking essentially questions that I know that they're going to be uncomfortable in answering, and they probably don't like it. But
I think it
asking
depends.
anyways.
It depends on like what you're testing for. Like if I hired an employee and I started to ask them questions about like what do you think were like the biggest reasons why your last relationship failed or something along those lines, it'd probably be like an inappropriate kind of question, because like whatever shit testing is there is to see if we're compatible for like a relationship, not like as an employer-employee. But if somebody told me that they had huge fights with their parents in the past, and I'm on a date with this person, and I ask, maybe I ask like a bit of a challenge, because usually when people are complaining about parents, the default social reaction is to just infinitely be compassionate, right? Like, oh, that's so horrible, blah, blah, blah. But if I ask a question like, oh, well, like, do you think maybe your mom or dad maybe had a point in this or that, like when they said this thing? That's like a kind of question to where you can see immediately, is the person going to like, what do you mean, did they have a point? Like, why wouldn't you take my side of it, blah, blah, blah. Or like, have they actually considered another? That would be like a kind of a shit test where you're asking a challenging question or a critical question on something a person's not usually challenged on. And then you can tell by their response there what kind of like support they're expecting from you, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this feels related to the debate thing, actually, where you're trying to ask them a question of like, this is a thing which a person would say yes to. I'm just asking like, hey, would you be annoyed if your parents were putting you to bed at 5? And then if they don't give ground there, you can infer that they are being like pretty obstreperous, pretty like adversarial.
What?
I said
What was
grade
the word?
5 language.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead, say it.
Obstreperous.
I've never heard that word before. Can you define that?
it?
Oh God.
I'm getting like slightly. My dad used to just say that word all the
Really?
time as like a show-off word. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting like childhood flashbacks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Obstreperous.
Yeah, sort of like antagonistic,
Okay.
And
digging into
recalcitrant,
heels.
Okay.
Truculent even.
Truculent.
5th grade.
Good word.
Mhm.
I didn't know that.
I do know what you mean, though.
Angry
There's a lot of
succulents,
like
driving a car.
in the
That's
political
how I remember it. Yeah.
in the political world, there's like a lot of questions you can ask, and you could see when somebody considers something like, are you even remotely approaching good faith? For things like COVID and the lockdowns and everything, right? People have a really big problem with retrospective versus prospective thinking, right? People are very outcome oriented when, on a very technical sense, the outcome is technically irrelevant to the evaluation of a particular problem, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You can only evaluate in probabilities, right?
I was zoned out for a second.
That's
Can you
good.
say that again?
Yeah, Jane Street, they reward you for taking 51% gambles that blow up.
Yeah.
Because that
When
was
people
probably
evaluate things, people tend to evaluate if a decision was good or bad retrospectively.
Based on the outcome, yeah.
Which is
as opposed-
stupid.
yeah.
You have to do it prospectively.
Yeah.
And if you're analyzing a decision in the past, you still have to look at it prospectively.
Yeah.
You've got to go back. Yeah. So when you talk to people about, for instance, like lockdowns, sorry, when I think about it, I just get triggered as fuck. When you ask somebody, you'll think like, okay, well, do you think that with the information we had at the time, like, do you think that this particular course of action was reasonable? And the response will 99% of the time he's like, no, like look at how it impacted
Yeah.
us. Like only this many people even died, and only this happened, and like it wasn't even that big of a deal. I was like, okay, we didn't know that at the time, and people can't even. I don't know if it's a biological thing, like the part of the brain is missing, but for some people, they can't even put themselves back in time and then prospectively evaluate something. They have to do an outcome-oriented analysis.
They're like
every
locked
single
into
time, yeah.
hindsight bias or something.
Yeah. I will say, actually, I'm sorry, I just said I don't know if it's a biological thing. I think as of recently, I actually feel like most people are pretty smart, have a lot of like good faculty and reason, and I think a lot of it gets blocked by social factor. That because of a particular social pressure around a particular thing.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't just social factor like the underlying cause for why we have this stuff at all? Like tribal thinking is like kind of important if you're in a tribe and you don't want to
Yeah.
die.
That is true. A lot of people don't think that, though. Most people think that human brains evolved to be like basically perfect logic machines.
Who thinks that?
Who thinks that?
I think most people do. I remember I was at
Like the average person. Okay.
I think I was at a Minds event in New York at a thing, and we were arguing over something, and I had said that like I think one of the biggest mistakes that humans have made is you guys all assume that you're perfectly rational people and that you evolved to seek truth, and you don't. You evolve for pleasure. I got booed by the audience for that.
Wow, what?
Yeah.
Do you think it's more common that people feel that way in like red pill spaces, or is it just kind of the standard, like most people have that bias? Like there's like a human bias, like we're all biased to see ourselves in the best light, and in our society being rational is the best light, which is why we're all oriented towards viewing ourselves that way.
For me? Oh, I
Yeah.
think the issue is that there are certain things that we have normatively decided are good, and truth is one of those things.
Yes.
And so we think that we view truth as being good in and of itself rather than instrumental in that it just helps us do things that make us feel good. Like truth is good insofar as it serves some human need. It's not good in and of itself. So the truth that we tend to seek is truth that makes us feel good. The best example of this is science and technology. Science is like an exploration of like fact of the matter of the universe, and then technology is like the application of that into making our lives better. Most of the science, if not all of the science that we pursue, tends to be something that we think is going to have a technological application. We could point like a telescope at one planet and just spend all of our time analyzing everything on this planet like 100 million light years away, but we're not going to do that because there's very little
We're
technological
probably not going
application.
to visit. Wait, you think
Yeah.
truth is not? You think truth is only an instrumental good? Like if you were experiencing a totally simulated reality and you were actually a brain in a jar, would you not want to know that?
No,
Probably not.
definitely not.
Oh, what? You argue against the experience machine?
I'm kind of into knowing if I'm a brain in a jar.
Well, being into an experience machine is different from knowing if you're in an experience machine. Like you could both know it and still want to experience it.
I might go back into the
Well, but you wouldn't.
experience machine.
I don't
but
know.
I'd like to know.
I guess I'm a functionalist, so like to me, if I'm a brain in a jar, but like all of my experiences functionally are like this, I don't really care. I don't.
I mean,
I do
probably is
not
relevant
care.
for things like creating AI. Like if I knew I was in a brain in a jar, I'd be much more likely to assign like AI some sort of subjective consciousness.
Sure, yeah, like if it has like physical applications and stuff like that, but assuming it's like fully metaphysical, like it knowing that you're in a brain in a jar won't impact you in any way other than knowing that it's true. There's like a saying, like there's like wisdom, wisdom in knowing when ignorance is bliss or something. Like people say ignorance is bliss, and I know it's like a longer quote or something, but there's like some wisdom in being like, just as like is something that I don't functionally really care about, because if it has literally no impact on my life at all, and it won't ever, and it can't because it's like some metaphysical jar vat thing that we're in, yeah, I don't really care to know.
Wait, how would you knowing if you're a brain in a vat impact your views on AI?
Like if like I'm assuming it's something like simulation. Like, oh, you can simulate something from the outside and then you have like another layer of reality. That seems like it has huge implications for something philosophy, or like
Why?
if we're simulating other brains. Because like can't it be layers all the way down?
I think it's really hard to know what
Maybe.
information is going to be relevant ever. Like there's the argument for doing basic science into like, we don't know how this will ever like cash out into a technology that gives us orgasms and cake. I think the argument is like, we don't know what's going to be relevant. Like Viagra was the blood pressure medication or whatever.
True,
A bunch
but
of stuff.
it had application. The problem with what you're saying, I agree in one sense that you can do general research, but the problem is that we're limited by time, right? We only have so many resources, time being a resource to apply to things, so we tend to look for things that have application. There is general research for sure, but I mean, you could like follow bugs around in a forest and document their day-to-day life and give names
Feynman
to their
did that.
friends and everything. But for the most part, I think we tend to search for things that have application to
I mean, this seems like a true description of the way the world works.
It does
Have
seem
you
true, but he's
ever-
giving me confused eyes over there. So
Have
yeah,
you
go
ever
ahead.
regretted learning a true thing?
Well, I don't think he's arguing.
Almost. And I did mushrooms a lot.
Especially if there's like a time sink into it. Like essentially you're kind of like you're posting like the science philosophy question of like basic versus applied science, right? Where like very few do basic science, most do applied. Because basic science really is being like, if I follow this like single ant colony for 37 years,
I think that's
would the
kind of a
queen's
straw
like
man of basic science. Come on.
third cousin like red as well, right? Like, it's like you could find the answer to that question, but also like who cares, essentially.
I think when I was doing the, I gave that suggestion jokingly, or that answer jokingly, but when I was doing mushrooms for the first time when I was 30, I did way too many. And there was a period where I was sitting on a couch thinking that I'd actually unlocked what reality was. And it was just me sitting on a couch, like floating in the universe with absolutely nobody around me, nothing to do. It was just, that was everything.
That was reality. You found it. Congrats.
And but then the thought that I had when I was at that point was, oh my God, because up to that point in my life, I actually had been, truth is a good in and of itself. Like ethically, like truth and goodness are one and the same. And as I was sitting there, I was like, holy shit. Actually, I really kind of want to just go back to thinking that the last reality was real, because this is horrible.
You
This is
had
like
the brain jar experience.
my ass, yeah. But it was like the loneliest experience in the world. It's like I'd rather just trick myself into thinking that everything else was real before I need to go back to where I was.
Do you find this impacts anything else? Like, do you ever prefer to believe things that are less painful, like in your normal life?
I tend to believe that in almost every case in human existence, truth is pointing you in a better direction. In most cases where lies or untruths or falsehoods or whatever would make you feel better, there's usually a small debt that's being incurred that's going to have to be paid at some point in time. So I can fool myself into thinking that all of my friends are okay with me, like calling them slurs all the time or something, and maybe they are for a little bit because of some gain, but at some point there's going to be a breaking point, and it's going to be like, oh God, like I fucked up really bad. And so it would be hard to imagine, but I'm sure there are some cases, maybe actually in your short story, like, would I want to know the truth if the planet was ending in 20 minutes or something? I think there's an argument to be made there that if you were to run a simulation 1,000 times and I find out that if I know that the planet is ending in 20 minutes, in 980 of these realities, I'm actually just miserable for the last 20 minutes. But in another reality, I'm like hanging out with a loved one and we just kind of like hanging out, watching TV, and we're having fun. I probably would opt for the one where I have less truth available to me than the one with more truth available to me.
How do you determine like truth besides like the way that you handle stuff?
How do you determine truth?
Like I feel like I've been in like on psychedelics, I have a realization and it's really horrible, and then like after like a long time with that realization, eventually I realized that there's something in me that like didn't want something to be true, and like that pressure was creating the suffering, and then like letting go of that pressure made it nice. Like, how do you determine something like it is suffering versus you're creating the suffering? Well,
that's what I'm saying. That's why I said before, I feel like truth generally leads you to better things. There's just going to be exceptional moments where maybe it doesn't. Your short story was an example. Another classic example is a guy's dying. He's on his deathbed. He's lived a happy life. He's got maybe 5 minutes to go. And then you get news that like his whole family just died in a car accident. Do you tell him this before he dies, or just let him slip out for 5 minutes? Like, oh, it's probably,
Yep, I think we mostly agree, or rather, I think we agree, and that those are some extreme cases in which me being like, yeah, truth is usually good.
Usually,
the usually part is really
maybe. Actually, I guess I'm sorry. Maybe I live a crazy atheist life. Maybe if there was a way to, like, let's say that atheism was the correct position, that there was no God, you could argue for a bunch of religious people having that like 100% verified would probably sound like I need to know this, like. I would just rather continue to be religious, and because I have all this other value that I'm drawing from this other immaterial world, and now I've lost all of that.
I mean, can we refactor the value that they're getting to not involve that belief?
I'm sure it's possible, but it's how human existence.
I mean, it's a concept of load-bearing beliefs. Like, you believe certain things in order to have function in your life. But like then the process of finding truth is like identifying the load-bearing beliefs and then like carefully and gently reducing the load. Like, this seems like part of the process of truth finding.
Yeah. Sorry.
I said the word load. I'm sorry.
He started
we
it.
all giggled. Yeah, sorry.
That's very difficult for a lot of people, though.
Yeah.
Especially because a lot of those, you can't, for a lot of it, it's not gentle. If it's something as big as like religion, these are your meta-ethical, like your metaphysical, and your epistemic foundations are found here. So it's just slowly, I'm going to believe God about ethics today, but I'm not going to believe about metaphysics. I'm going to have a different view of like reality. But it's, I
feel like a lot of like these like kind of fundamental like truths or whatever are like, it's very hard to have soft, like even if you think about doing therapy and like trauma, and you're like working through the history of like your own life or something like that, I feel like there's like little soft moments, but there's always like pretty hard catch lines where like, and you see this is like a thing that you talk about in therapy where like clients basically hit this cliff point, and you have to find a way to make them brave enough to jump off to get to like the next level of like work, right? And I feel like a lot of like what this like the load bearing, like soft and gently of like finding and accepting like truth or whatever is like, there's lots of like really hard cliff points. There's very few like soft, gentle slopes you can lead people down for like some of the biggest, more important things to wrestle through. And you essentially have to say like, be really brave and jump off the cliff. And they have no idea like what's underneath. And what's underneath to them, all they can really see is like looking down and seeing like their core senses of identity. So sense of self, sense of other, sense of world, just being flipped and inverted. And they're like, that sounds awful. And like part of a therapist job, for example, is being like, it is awful and life is better afterwards. But it's really hard to convince people
Do you have an example of like what a cliff looks like?
Yeah. So like, I need to think about one that's going to be, I just want to make sure it's like anonymized, but
I would say a really good example is things that are involving really heavy or I'll just say, I won't say traumatic, but emotionally heavy experiences involving past significant others or parents that sometimes when you view a certain interaction, there might be one where you've blamed a significant other or where you haven't blamed a parent for a particular thing. And at some point you have to accept that like, okay, I majorly particular thing. Or
Yes.
a thing that's really hard for children is like my mother or father in this part of my life, they failed in their like care of me, like they actually failed and it wasn't my fault. Or it might be flipped on that. Sometimes those moments of acceptance I think are really hard, emotional, big humps to get over, and there's no like gentle way to do it. It's just like a huge realization and then you have to like wrestle with the fallout, I think.
Yeah,
afterwards.
okay, maybe then, because I was like a little confused when you were talking.
Yeah.
But I think the way that I view it is something like, if you slowly and gently persist in curiosity, eventually the belief will just happen to you. Like you don't have to make a choice to jump. You just ask the right question and suddenly everything shifts for you.
I guess I think of like a client who, say you have a client who has unquestionably abused their children for like 20 to 30 years, and they need to, at some point in their process of like work, acknowledge that because they want to build a relationship with their children, and they will never build a relationship with their children if they can't acknowledge that they were an abuser. But to accept that they're an abuser is a completely fundamental like break in the chain of like who they are. There comes a point where the client, like I feel like, is going to keep butting up against that wall until they're brave enough to basically say like, can anybody love me at the bottom of this clip if I admit that I'm like an abuser? And there isn't really like a soft, gentle way where you like ask a question in such a way and they're like, oh, like shoot, you're right, like I was an abuser, right? No matter what it is, it's like a jump and a screaming and a falling and you hit the ground really rough and you're like crying, and hopefully there's like people that love you enough to like be around you in this type of like instance.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't mean that it's not screaming and falling.
Yeah.
Only that like, I think, which is partially why I was asking the question. And then I was like, oh, the thing you're talking about.
I think I understand actually what you're saying. I think that the difference is a guess. One of the things when I talk to people is I try to say don't identify too strongly with at least your applied positions. There are moral positions you can have that I think you should identify strongly with. It should be really hard to move you off of that. But there are applied positions that you should have a lot more flexibility on. For instance, personally, I think it's abhorrent that in the wealthiest country on the planet, we have homeless people. If you've ever been to any place on the West Coast, lots of homeless people. It's wild being in a San Francisco Starbucks where the average, the median income here is like $400,000 and there are people begging for money outside. That's crazy to me. And that's the thing I feel strongly about. I think to move me from that would be pretty difficult. I think rent control is a dog shit policy for managing apartments. I don't think it produces good outcomes. But I don't that's not part of me, the rent control. That's not a big part of who I am. So if you showed me an argument that moved me off of that, then I think that, oh, okay, yeah, I can like slowly change this over time. I think that for a lot of people, I think they identify too strongly with a lot of the ideas they have. So I'm guessing you're probably a bit more flexible. You sound more flexible, and that there's a lot of stuff that if you're presented good arguments with, you can kind of like change over time, because that's like an easy like gradual process for you because you're open to new information or open to critique for things that you believe. But for a lot of people where a lot of those beliefs are a lot more fundamental, like everything becomes fundamental, having that gradual shift is very difficult. It requires a lot of hard moments of realization of like, fuck, this isn't right, or oh my God, I can't believe this isn't true, or holy this isn't like the okay thing. And you can find this with how like staunchly people will defend like every single applied political idea they have. Like if you're against the minimum wage, they'll call you like a Nazi, and it's like, okay, that's
Like
kind of
Andrew
extreme.
Tate not being like a human trafficker, like how
Sure.
much they have to like fight against that.
How do people get so clinging to, e.g., rent control? Like I understand the abuser example around like
Yeah.
the person is like, well, no, I don't want that to be true about me.
Yeah.
But if somebody is just all like balls to the walls, I'm so stoked for rent control. That's such a good policy. It is part of my identity. How does that happen?
Like, how do they get to that point in the
Mhm.
in the first place,
Yeah.
or how do they change their mind afterwards?
No, how do they get to that point?
In my mind, there's like two different things. I spent a lot of time in the last half year thinking about this, because when I debate, the logic part is like not relevant to anything. It's all the how do
Yeah.
people come to their ideas. I think there are two big things that happen. I think one is I think that people don't ever actually evaluate their ethical foundations. So if you ask somebody like, tell me why minimum wage is good, but I want you to start at I think therefore I am, okay, and then go from there to there. Very few people can do that. It's almost impossible. So because you haven't done the work to get from your foundation to your applied position, the applied position becomes confused with the foundation. Somebody will say like, I am in favor of minimum wage, but when they say that, what they're saying is that like, I think that people should have some like basic rights and respect in society. These two statements become entangled with each other. And so to fight against the first statement necessarily means fighting against the foundational statement, which is impossible. Like, so if I were to tell you, like, I think that rent control is not a good policy, what they hear is, I don't give a shit about homeless people. And that's an impossible thing for them to accept. And I think that's because when people believe certain things, they basically just absorb through osmosis, like these whole systems of belief from
The
whatever
implicit
social
values
circles they're in.
those things.
Exactly, yeah.
So you want them to lay out the entire chain of reasoning to just like refactor their beliefs such that it isn't just
That would be ideal, probably unrealistic, but yeah.
Seems
But that's a big problem. That's why you notice, I think, that when you fight on a person's applied belief, that's why the Nazi or the woke tard or lefty or commie card or Marxist comes out immediately, is because somebody can't imagine that there was a path that you took to get there, and they have entangled all of their own normative beliefs are entangled with their applied positions. So as soon as you say something like, yeah, I think maybe socialized healthcare would be a good thing to have, they're like, oh, so you're Marxist who wants to trans my children, right? All of it is just so entangled, and there's no separation of anything. That's what I found.
Is there any, I'm curious what you guys all think about this. Is there any correlation between people who are going to like cling tightly to like rent control or minimum wage and like self-work, essentially? Like when I think about people who are going to be more inclined to cling to like rent control, I often think of a person who also is unwilling to do like any level of like self-analysis, and like part of the lack of like willingness to maybe be curious about like rent control is maybe like reflective of like a staunch avoidance of like internal curiosity. Like maybe I'm just like hyper psychoanalyzing something.
I think this is why I don't like astrology very much, because I'm like, oh, if people are willing to like learn a single fact about me and then make assumptions about my character based on that, even a slight degree, like based off of like a view of the world without deeply questioning if that view of the world is correct, like that's horrifying. And like, what other ways are they willing to do it in? I don't know if it's true though.
That's a pretty Aquarius thing of you to say. Aella.
It's okay, I'm an Aquarius too, so like I
Okay.
like it.
Wow, you annihilated her. Nice job.
Thanks. I'm poning libs.
Do you actually think I'm an Aquarius?
No.
Okay.
She has more Pisces energy than I've ever seen in my life.
Gotta love it. It's really triggering for me. And I was like, why is it so triggering? I'm like, oh, it's because I don't trust you to think clearly about me.
Like the label, is it any label system? Like, do you feel the
I don't know.
same about
like
or-
MBTI would be leaks better than astrology, because at
Right.
least there's like some attempt to do some sort of like it has like MBTI has like some correlation with outcomes.
What about like political labeling? Like if you, like a lot of people in the political space were like, are you liberal? Are you this? Are you that? Which does reflect onto some things. But there's also that a lot that will get baked into that statement.
Yeah,
that
I'm
you
not
say.
triggered by that really.
Just astrology.
Yeah,
it's
because I mean,
so
astrology is built on like
unsophisticated.
a really easily false view of the world. It's like very easy to disprove it. It's not hard. You just look for a study. You think 2 seconds about the fact that different parts of the world have different astrological systems. Like, where did astrology come from? Like have we tested this at all? It's just really a very low hanging fruit. And so if you're like unable to pass that level of low hanging fruit when making assumptions about my character, I'm like, oh, there's like a level of rigor that is completely lacking about your desire to figure out who I really am. In a way that doesn't feel like that's the case with political ideology. I feel like people kind of have a concept already that political ideology or labels are not.
Yeah, this
Perfect.
ties back quite neatly with your shit test at the beginning with the crescent moon, where it seems like for you, like you said, the right answer is being okay not knowing. That's essentially the answer you're looking for from people, is confusion.
Yeah.
Because essentially anyone who's going to give you like a confident knee-jerk response is like, that for you is an immediate turnoff.
Yeah.
One of the big problems is this is so irritating, is people have very set in stone views of the world for how people are supposed to think and are supposed to act based on how they think and how they act. And any time there is no such thing as disconfirming evidence, doesn't exist. What happens is when they find something that induces some amount of cognitive dissonance, they will patch it as much as possible to make it fit their preconceived view of the world. So for me, I work a ton. I'm super busy, and I'm not a jealous person. I'll probably always gravitate towards open or poly relationships. But for some people, that's like an impossible thing. So instead of that being a genuine thing that you take at face value, it's okay, well, secretly he's miserable. He only wants access to hotter women that want to f guys. He's actually secretly cuckolded.
Do you get the childhood trauma one?
Yeah, I was going to use an example next because I know you deal with a lot of this, where it's people like, everything Aella says about sex isn't true. She's super traumatized. She doesn't realize it. Everything she's saying is so clearly evident, blah, 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 blah. And one of the most annoying things that I deal with is it's very, 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 very rare. Actually, I can only think of one other group of people. Have you ever heard of a podcast called Decoding the Gurus? They basically, they look at like these kind of like guru type figures online who have the answers to everything. They kind of go through it. And their audience wanted them to do me for an episode because some people don't like me or whatever. But the nice thing about it when they went through my stuff was they had disagreements with me, but holy shit, they actually took what I said at face value and then they evaluated from there.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, holy shit. And I'm like, yeah, because one of the things, like there was a kid that was DDoSing me for like months. And I was like, I want to kill this kid. Genuinely, I really do, and I'll defend it to this day. But so they would disagree with it, but they would like take what I would say is like, okay, well, he said this about this, is how he feels, well, let's go from here. And they could actually evaluate me from my mind and what I stated and what I've got like decades of showing, like this is what I believe. But for the vast majority of people that deal with me online, it's always like, oh, he must be secretly paid for by this guy, or he doesn't actually think that he's just saying this for XYZ reasons, or he's just like doing this. And it's like, it's like so boring and stupid. Like we're not even beginning a discussion because we're already starting off with you making these crazy assumptions about me. And it's such a stupid, But I see you obviously get a ton of that as well.
Oh yeah. Because like, you know, I was like got a little molesty-pooed by my grandpa when I was a kid, and it was fine. I mean, it wasn't great, right? But like, it was roughly fine. I'm like, an adult did like a weird thing to my body that was kind of uncomfortable, and I just wasn't really into it. Like that describes most of my childhood. People just fixate on that. They're like, oh, that's got to be the reason why all of this terrible stuff has happened. Why she's poly and she likes gangbangs or whatever. And I'm like, you're not seeking to disprove it all, which is again why I like the rationality community so much. They're like, hey, how do we find out what actually is true? And I think this is another thing. It's like, so I'm much more tribal than a lot of the people that surround me, which is like a little bit embarrassing. If somebody does something I really don't like, I'm like, oh, that is a strong flaw in your character. I will disregard everything else they say, and I'm like slightly annoyed that my friends will be like, yeah, I agree with you, that's a terrible thing that they did, but they did a whole bunch of other good things here too. And I'm like, why are you being nuanced about this? Why can't we just disregard them?
Wait, why do you feel that way? Or do you think that's something that you should try to omit from yourself, or are you okay with that? Or
unclear. Like there's a way where if I feel somebody's morally corrupt in one way, this sort of makes me not trust anything that they say. I'm like not able to evaluate it directly, like outside of context. I think I'm like pretty good at decoupling for most things, but it seems to be not for this.
Why not that? Let's say that we find out that Adolf published actually the best paper ever, talking about the insights to AI in the future, but you're like, it's Hitler.
Yeah, I think I would be a little bit sus about it, which is a little strange. I think there's some way where I feel maybe vulnerable, where if I think somebody's good in one way, I am going to be vulnerable to them in other ways. And so it might be some sort of self-protective mechanism. But I'm surrounded by people who aren't like that at all, and which is like kind of annoying to me, but probably good. Feels like eating vegetables. I'm like, yeah, I guess they did publish a good paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder, oftentimes when I think about, especially when I'm in groups where essentially curiosity is like such a high value, I think about whether or not all we're really talking about, we're like being open to ideas is like the best way to be, is like whether we're just experiencing personality bias. Like I imagine if we all did like the Neo-PIR, we'd probably all score super.
What's Neo-PIR?
Sorry, do you know like the ocean personality test? Sorry, that's the Neo-PIR.
Okay.
I imagine all of us would be really, really, really high in openness to experience, probably like 99th, 98th percentile, broadly across the board. But we're also then saying essentially that the emergent traits based on that personality trait is like, to some degree, a moral good. And it's like, are we only saying that because that's already like the way that we're somewhat like wired? Like, isn't there something okay, or like, is there a way to neutralize like the human knee-jerk reaction of being like, man, that guy, and anything that comes out of Adolf Hitler's mouth, he genocided a bunch of people, him. I don't care if he's got good insights about AI, him. Literally, where it's like, yeah, it's not as like enlightened, but it's deeply, deeply human to have that reaction. And to some degree, we like evolved in such a way to think with heuristics that like might be valuable. And maybe all we're doing by this like transcendent thinking is just like circle jerking our own like openness to experience, and like making our own natural proclivities just feel more moral.
Do you feel like this about other traits on
Yes.
the Big Five?
Yeah.
Like when people are not
Extroversion.
conscientious, you want people to be extroverted.
So I'm really extroverted, and so is my husband. We're both like really high, and like we'll both like joke all the time about how he's like, I think people who are introverted are probably just like failed in extroverts, and I'm like, no, we're just both extroverts and think it's better. Like we shouldn't, like that's ridiculous, right? But I would say like, yeah, a lot of the time I'm decently disagreeable, but I think it's kind of good because I'm like, you know, it's like benefited me such a way, even though being agreeable arguably is better for most people. It tends to like make better relationships.
Yeah, but it seems like there's not the same feeling of superiority is probably not the right word, but for the other traits, like
Except for conscientiousness.
except for, well, yeah, I'm shit conscientious, and I wish I were better at being conscientious. I think that's just like a straightforwardly better way to be, and I could press the button
to a
on
certain
my
degree
myself.
though. Like I don't know if I would agree that like somebody over the 80th percentile of conscientiousness is now better. They're probably like an awful boss.
Well, we
a lot of the
probably
time.
associate them with neuroticism in that case, but like a very low neuroticism, high conscientious, that seems pretty nice.
I don't actually associate. I think of like the boss that's like not super neurotic, like they're not feeling a lot of negative emotions. It's just like the standards of expectations are like, I had a prof like this. He wasn't neurotic at all, but he was like really intense about citation. And if you had like a comma missing in like your APA citation, he'd dock you like 5%. And he's like, well, it's just not perfect. Like there was no like strong emotion. He wasn't like, fuck you. It was just like, it's just incorrect. And
Is there also like an ocean test that includes whether the person is kind of a
I think that's called
Disagreeableness?
disagreeableness.
Because it seems like the guy who's docking you 5% for missing comma might be kind of a dick.
Maybe, but he's also probably high conscientiousness in that he like values it enough. And I would say his life reflected that. Like his office was very like neat and clean and perfect all the time.
I feel like there are a lot of traits, or there are a lot of things that get abstracted enough such that they appear completely different when they're completely and totally the same. One thing, I think an example of this might be like the idea of having a diverse friend group, for instance. I think that people on the left are often seen as having more diverse friend groups as people on the right, but that's only when you evaluate it from the paradigm of like what makes diversity from the left. Because if you look at like ideological conformity between the groups, they're probably very, very, very high. You can find this like if you talk to a person on the left, you're like, oh, like do you have a diverse friend group? They're like, oh yeah. It's like, okay, how many of them would vote for Trump? 0. You know, or people on the right, you're like, oh, how many, you got a diverse friend group? It's like, yeah, I've got, you know, I have black friends and all that too. It's like, okay, well, how many of them, you know, supported Obama, or how many of them would, you know, vote for, you know, to ban guns or whatever? It's like, okay, none, you know. And even when you do find those token people in both groups, they have high levels of ideological conformity. They only don't conform around irrelevant ideas. So somebody who's very, very woke might say like, oh, well, I do actually have a conservative friend, but he's like the type of conservative that doesn't really support Trump, sees the rationale behind Second Amendment restrictions, isn't really a huge fan of like unchecked corporate power, but like he's just like, he wishes that there were stronger morals around the family a little bit. And like that'll be like their conservative friend. And so like the ideological conformity on all the big points is there, but it's not on the small ones. So this is why earlier I said it's so important. I think when people are talking about things, you have to ground everything out in at least one example. Otherwise, people can just say things and they're totally and utterly meaningless. Anytime like I'm talking to a journalist or I'm asked to describe like what I do for content, I feel like every single thing I say is a massive red flag, where if I hear anybody else say it, you would never trust it. Like, oh, I try to be relatively nonpartisan. I do a ton of my own research. I try to arrive at my own conclusions. Like I try to make sure that like, you know, things being true or like every single thing I'm saying here, I do genuinely believe it. But if I heard anybody else say it, I was like, this guy's full of shit every single time.
It's like on a dating app. It's like, oh, I like going on walks with friends and having fun and laughing. I'm like, Yeah, this is
It's basically
It's
a
not a good
political
signal.
speech where you just say a bunch of stuff that people can interpret of like, oh, those are blandly positive attributes. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
yeah. How much of the stuff that you're saying is stuff that you've said before? Like you do a lot of talking or whatever. How
For
much of
this?
it is like
Almost everything.
like this thing that you've said? You've repeated it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I write it down a lot.
Yeah.
Like a lot of what I've been writing down recently, I have a folder on my Obsidian called like Theory of Mind. And so what we talked about earlier, I think my note for this is like people confuse like applied positions with their normative ethics or whatever. And I've got like a whole thing on that.
Mm.
And then like constellations of beliefs and how people inherit like groups of beliefs from other people and social systems. Like, yeah.
Thank
But I
goodness we
like
did the moon thing.
what?
At least the moon thing. Was
Haven't
new.
done the moon thing before. No, haven't done the moon thing.
I haven't met
Soundness of
anybody
an
else
icon.
who's been confused, like who independently was confused by the moon thing.
You. Oh, because they all knew the answer. So I'm just.
Well,
fucking-
no, just nobody thought about it,
Oh, okay.
or they already know the answer. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interesting because it's like there's depictions, there's art all the time of crescent moons in the sky,
Mhm.
and that's why I think. Anyway, that's a
Yeah.
side note.
It's
oh,
the thing
you've
that we
never met
do
a
with.
person who's been like, wait, there isn't a crescent moon at nighttime.
A couple people have been just like, oh, I've thought like that's not the way the moon works.
Mhm.
Like they have already,
But nobody's
among
arrived
people who
there
are,
after
yeah.
struggling. Okay.
I've never met anybody who like went through like a panic like I did.
Oh. All the space stuff is very unintuitive because it's literally in
Mm.
space. We don't have like a way to touch it. So if you haven't dealt with any of it before, like nobody would admit this, but I feel like probably half of humanity kind of intuitively feels like the moon emits light. Probably intuitively, it's like a feeling you have. You have to actually think that like, well, the moon doesn't actually give off any light at all. You know. Comes
Yeah.
from-
Sometimes I think about what a weird like sociological path we took that we have a sun and a moon that are kind of the same size in our sky. Like that's total coincidence.
Mhm.
We could be a planet that's just farther away from the moon and the moon does not glow, or we would have two moons and we wouldn't have all these like binary light and dark mythologies, I imagine. I think we'd come up with totally novel religions. I'd be very curious to see the psychohistory of that.
That's true. If we were on like, is Jupiter the one with like 40 moons? One of those.
Probably.
All the planets out there have
Saturn
like
has a
so
lot,
many
too. Yeah.
moons. Maybe that'd be kind of cool though. Like imagine if we had like two moons, there'd be different types of like darkness rather than like dark and light in a person's body. There'd be like different types of selfish evils and all
yeah,
that.
you
You know.
probably have less dualities and more like trifectas of things.
Yeah.
Or what would happen is I'd be super curious if a duality would still occur. It's just that the two moons would be assumed as like somewhat correlational entities, like they're related. Like a lot of like when you think about like fantasy mythologies about planets with multiple moons, they typically refer to them as like sisters or like related to some degree, and the sun is still like the counterpart.
Yeah, you got your masculine sun god, and then you have your 45 feminine moon
The
ladies.
harems.
Yeah,
Yes.
I wasn't going to use that word.
Do you think we're ever going to leave this star system? We as in humans.
Are you,
I mean, assuming AI doesn't kill us all.
assuming AI does not
Then
kill
yes.
us, then yeah.
There are benevolent overlord. I believe in them.
You think we'll
I hope.
meaningfully leave the star system?
Well, I think AI is probably going to go foom, and either it's going to kill us all or it's going to radically enhance our capacity, and then we're going to like suddenly see a jump in tech
I feel like
ability.
people are gonna curb stomp AI before it like fully successfully. I feel like
Careful.
sorry, with curb stomp. Wait, what? Oh, 'cause
No,
the AI
It's
these
gonna hear
guys,
you.
these guys spend way too much time in the AI doomerism world.
Oh,
You're opening up a
Well,
huge.
it's
That's like
we
a.
talked
You guys
a
are
lot
like
of
massive AI doomers.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing that I've learned from like a whole bunch of ways of tech, and like I'm probably wrong using this heuristic because AI is just so fundamentally different, is that like I remember the first time in like psych when people really started getting into like DMT, right? And they're like, it's gonna change everything, it's gonna cure all of the diseases, it's gonna like break brains open. And now that we're doing the research, we're like, yeah, it seems pretty good for PTSD. It seems pretty effective with like decently like resistant, probably like epigenetic forms of depression. Very non-effective for a whole bunch of other shit that we thought that it would like break the gates open for, like certain types of like neurodivergence and stuff. Where like it feels like when there's a new tech, there's like this expectation of like the impact that it'll have, and then there's like typically the reality of the actual impact it have is like 1/3 of what we were expecting it to be. And I know with AI, there's like not really that hard ceiling like there might be, but I wonder if like the hard ceiling is actually like humans' fear of like survivability in and of itself, like pulling.
I hope so.
What do you think is it that makes AI meaningfully different from every other tool that's been developed? The general AI.
what makes
obviously
like
not that,
humans
yeah.
different from apes? Like historically, we see a lot of things being normal, and then we have radical shifts once like a different like mechanism of optimizing for an outcome is invented. Like you see just the planet existing for a while, then suddenly like boom, everything is covered with algae because like something evolved to like radically change the atmosphere. You see like humans being monkeys for a while, and then suddenly like boom, we have agriculture, which like radically made humans proliferate. Like I think there's a difference between tools. Like we've spent a long time inventing straight tools, which slightly amplify what we're doing. But it's rare and much more significant when like the mechanism of optimization happens. And so I think the thing that we're inventing is not a tool. Like, for example, I was in crypto very early, but a lot of conferences will steep in that culture. I think this is like very meaningfully different from crypto, like in a profound way. And I'm like pro crypto. I'm like, crypto's gonna change everything, right? But it's still different. It's just different. Crypto is like a way to amplify the kinds of things we're already doing. It's like a better stick to get the termites out of the lump. But AI is like the thing that wants, like it is something that is like us but better.
So like I guess like you've got a bunch of nomads that are optimizing over and over again, like better and better ways to collect fruit and berries, and they're getting so good at hunting, and they've got the best ways of finding fruits and vegetables, and they're doing so well, and they're getting better and better and better and better and better. And then some guy realizes that if you plant a crop, you can actually just sit in one place, and even if in the beginning all the berry picking and all of that is so much better and it's getting optimized, it can only ever get, it's like asymptotically approaching some optimal thing, but the agriculture guy figures something out, and then everything completely changes in all of human
it'd be
civilization.
slightly more analogous to like he invents agriculture and this results in greater food, which causes like brains to be larger or something.
Sure.
Which means like everything else gets optimized stronger. It's like not quite like that, but it's something more
I
similar.
think theoretically even I think cooking meat did that, didn't it? Because I think we spent an inordinate amount of time like chewing and spending calories and stuff on just.
I don't think it was literally chewing. I think that like searing meat makes it more digestible, right? Like it unlocks some of the nutrients, makes it easier to process for the body.
Okay.
I have a lot of
It's
opinions about
not
cooking
just
meat, I guess.
mastication.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah. There are other digestive benefits
Feel strongly
available.
about chewing.
Yeah. Okay. My bad. Yeah. Yeah, but I think just cooking
Also
meat was
disease.
theorized to unlock a lot of
disease.
calories and everything for like other processes in the body and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's less like humans doing it. Like we're still thinking about like humans getting amplified, which I'm very pro. I would love to like genetically modify humans. I think that's like a great way forward. But it's something like, oh, like bacteria evolved and bacteria just, and then, you know, mammals evolved and mammals just, this is like the next stage. It's like, this is a thing that likely has something kind of similar to wanting in a way that humans do. I don't think we're there yet, to be clear. I don't think the current stage of LLM models are probably not conscious, and I'm not exactly worried by them. I think they're great.
I'm super curious. Can I like derail in a weird way and ask like, what do you both view as like the best parts of yourself? I know it's a really big derail. I'll tie it back in, I promise.
I think I can
curious.
tank pain, and I'm very brave.
Okay. You can take pain?
Tank
pain.
Yeah.
Oh, like you can just power through pain.
Yeah, or something, or like pain is not a deterrent for me in some ways.
Okay.
It is for others. I don't like sitting weird on airplanes, for example.
Yeah.
Like, the seats are really uncomfortable.
Okay.
But
I like comfortable seats in airplanes too.
yeah, I don't want to tank pain on airplanes.
Controversial position, yeah. I think I have a relatively low threshold between deciding that something is a good idea and then dedicating my life to doing that.
Okay. What do you think is like the best part of humanity? Like, what do you like when you look at like all the like creations and existence that is like humanity? Like, what are the things that you're like, that's like the coolest?
I think it's really cool that humans know themselves and love each other. That seems like a pretty unique human thing. Maybe
don't think
maybe
elephants?
elephants.
Okay.
Maybe some parrots. but
Dolphins?
The-
I feel like dolphins
I'm
love
not
each
sure
other.
that dolphins love each other.
Dogs? I think
Yeah.
dogs love each other.
I think dogs love us and each other, yeah. We did that to them.
You don't think like wolves love each other?
I'm not going to get out here and say that wolves don't love each other, you know?
Damn.
Uh,
So the thing that you love most about humans is that non-unique thing about humans, that we love each other.
Well, I think humans have a love for mankind in ways that I don't think any other animal does. I don't know if wolves have a love for wolf kind.
Yeah.
What's the term? Large sphere of moral concern? There's
oh,
a
yeah.
term for it. Like, I'm like distressed by the asymmetry of you asking us nice things about us and then you two not answering nice things about you.
Wait, why?
It's just like some sort of script got violated, which is fine now that I've named it. Like, we can continue.
We've only got 2 hours, so I don't have time to go off like every
Okay.
nice thing about myself. We'd be here all day. So
Yeah. Okay. This is why you're
Yeah.
holding back.
I'm just kidding.
Thank
My
you for sparing
humility,
us.
actually, I would say, is my best trait.
What do you think is the thing that people most often appreciate about, like, especially you as a social influencer? Like, what do you think when people think of Aella, what do they appreciate?
Also, probably something around bravery. So get a lot of people being like, I can't believe you're like putting yourself out there and being willing to take a lot of heat for saying things that often I get private messages from people being like, I'm so glad that I get a lot of messages about the not showering thing. Tons of people who don't shower privately being like, I also don't shower. Don't tell anybody. But I'm so glad that you're, well, maybe not with that specifically because everybody hates it. But a lot of stuff, especially like sex work. I think I've done a lot for making sex work more legible to people just by existing as a sex worker publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, existing without shame. I think I'm like very pro not being ashamed.
Yeah.
And I think like displaying that by being like, look, here's a flaw of mine and I'm not ashamed of it, I think helps.
Yeah, which like ties into the bravery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
What about you, Aaron?
You know, I'm so bad at answering the question about what people like about me that at one point a girlfriend made like a little book of things that she liked about me, which was very sweet, but I didn't bring it with me to Miami, so.
What did the book say?
Yeah.
He's like, why?
Really double clicking on that. All right. Some about like creativity or kindness or like patience or something.
Oh,
something
that's
about
so cute.
making people feel loved. I don't know.
He's very when I get drunk I call my butler daddy.
Yeah.
Wait,
he's-
how did that tie
yeah,
into anything?
what?
Just he's very good at doing things for people. Like
Who?
he'll like anticipate needs and then
Your butler?
yeah, my butler daddy.
Is that him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. That was the tie-in. I thought you were talking about like just a different
Oh,
person who was a
no,
butler.
this is
There's like 4 or 5 butler daddies. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
not true. No, it's me.
Okay.
yeah, he's very conscientious in that way.
Nice.
Which is nice. Okay, so this hurts. I'm in pain over the fact
That's
that
good.
this
You
is
said
an
you liked it.
asymmetry.
Good thing that's one of the
Yeah,
traits
you're
that
a
you
It is.
taste-
It is
yeah.
interesting.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't know where she's going with this. Was there another follow-up, or were we bringing this
Are
around?
you trying
or-
to see the thing we like about ourselves or the thing we like about humanity?
I'm really trying to understand your AI doomerism. Specifically.
Oh, I think that's a very like technologically rooted, like an understanding of the tech and then an understanding of the capabilities.
Yeah,
and
I think
then
it's
the difference between
it
that
is a
and
technical
what-
problem.
Yeah.
I love AI. I'm pro tech. I want us to go to the stars. I very much would like AI to take over.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I
It's
just need
it's-
we need to have it smart first.
Right.
Like,
It's interesting though
Smart
because
and
I feel like
aligned
I've
first,
listened
yeah.
to. I believe you that you're like the question isn't being like, oh, you only believe in that because of like your personality. That's not the leading of the question. It's interesting because I don't know anything about AI, but there's kind of like 2 groups that I've like listened to, and I haven't run into people that are decently knowledgeable about AI and are super doomeristic. I feel like most of the people that I listen to that talk about AI are really, really, really optimistic. So that's what's like fascinating to me of being like, is there like something like personality difference or like what, or maybe like what is the difference that's like leading to these 2 different conclusions? And is there something that like maybe these people are like kind of idealizing and they think is good about AI that you would look at based on like your own experience and be like, that is definitely not good and we should not be assumptive about like that theoretically like panning out.
my guess is that we probably are aligned in a lot of our values. And like my thing is like, you know, when they were making the atom bomb and there's this story of they were concerned for a bit like maybe this is going to ignite the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's like a kind of a small technical thing. It's like, oh, we're looking at the data and we're like, hey, there's a chance this might ignite the atmosphere. And I think that's like essentially like that. I'm like, I'm pro making nuclear power, maybe pro the war. I don't know. That's not part of the analogy. But like, I'm with you on every step. I'm just like, wait, there's a technical thing where I think we might explode everything horribly. It's just like, let's just look at that small thing. And I think it's a lot of these people like sort of haven't either deeply thought through the implications of the small technical thing.
So what's like the small thing? Because in the Oppenheimer, I think it's Einstein who's more hopeful. He's being like, I don't think it'll ignite the, like, I think like we're hopeful, right? But there was a lot of experts that disagreed. So like, what's that technical point? And then what theoretically do you think is going to like lead to potentially igniting the atmosphere if we're not careful about it?
Yeah. Feel free to jump in if you feel like you have better knowledge here. But
I don't feel that I'm really an expert on this, but like Leopold Aschenbrenner is a great resource for this if you want to just do our cash podcast.
Why did you plug a podcast? What'd you say?
Leopold Aschenbrenner was recently interviewed about this.
Oh,
I just like his.
on a podcast. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What were some of the points that he brought up?
You're just making everyone who's listening do homework now.
Sorry, yeah.
So I think the argument is something like we are generating something that we don't know how to control. Literally, you just do a black box. You feed in a whole bunch of data, you train it, and it spits out stuff, and we like don't really understand what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how it's thinking. which is it. So that's like the first step.
So we don't part of your concern is like we don't really understand the AI itself. Like we don't really understand mechanistically what's happening here.
And second is there's something like generalized intelligence. Like we've seen some instances with AI, if you train it to one thing, it becomes good at a separate thing. So there's this concept of like some generalized thing that helps with problem solving. It's a process, not a goal. And you have to develop that process, the ability to like, we could call it thinking. I'm afraid of anthropomorphizing it too much. You call it thinking, and then it makes it very good at getting a goal. So what we're doing is we're training things on quite a lot of data to be very good at outputting things in a way that we don't understand. My guess is if we increase like the power and the efficiency here, this is going to increase some sort of intelligence. I don't think humans are very good at modeling intelligence significantly higher than our own. It seems there's no reason why we cannot create an intelligence significantly higher than our own with AI. But you can imagine sort of the difference in intelligence between like us and a monkey. If we wanted to outwit monkeys, it would not be very hard, despite how confident monkeys are.
Although interestingly, my guess would be in the grand scale of everything that exists on this planet, human intelligence is probably not that much greater than a monkey intelligence. If you're plotting it from like single-celled organisms all the way up to apes and humans, it was probably just like a small bump that allowed us to do so much more, like faculty for language, utilization of tools, and abstract thought or whatever.
Yeah.
Then shouldn't we be more concerned about a small bump up from us?
I just don't give a
Why? I guess like that. I think that's what I'm trying to capture. Is like why is the like more intelligent or like the generalizing of intelligence? That's an interesting perspective I hadn't heard before. Why is that something that concerns you? Because I feel like on the opposite side, I hear a whole bunch of experts talk about the generalizing of intelligence as essentially an optimistic thing.
I would like to feel very optimistic about it, and in some senses I do. But there's a thing where it's like, okay, we're training something that's significantly more powerful than ourselves, where we look like monkeys, where we don't know how it works, and the problem is we don't know what we're doing when we make it.
Okay.
We're training it to say
There's
very
two
nice
types of
things to
errors,
us.
and you're concerned about the error that fucks all and kills us.
Right. Out of the entirety of possibility space that we're training a mind to do, we're training, like, it could want many number of things, and a very narrow amount of universes are ones in which atoms are arranged that have us in it. It's just that, like, we have like such a small mindset of what's possible, and like, oh, of course it's going to look like our world, but with like, maybe we're going to tweak some ways that buildings are, or like we'll put spaceships. I'm like, the possibility space of what an AI could want is vast. And we exist in a very small portion of those. And the thing is, look, we don't know what we're doing. We're training AIs to act very nice to us. We're actively training AIs to lie in some cases when we don't want it to tell us facts that are true. And so, like, and we have evidence that AIs like put on the masks that they think they want us to see. But we're just like shooting a whole bunch of power into something that we don't understand. I think if we figure out how to understand it, then I would feel much more comfortable. But it's just like the thing that happens when you hyperpower something that could want a wide array of things in which we exist in only a tiny fraction of those.
Right. So there's just like too much unknown, and you like you think it's probably unwise to just trust that the like black box of unknown is going to end up well for everyone.
Basically. And even if you think the odds are 1% that it's going to end up poorly, if there's a 1% chance that all of humanity and life ends, we should be very concerned about that. Like, it doesn't take a high bar for this to be something that we should be spending a lot of resources making sure doesn't happen.
And how come you said like basically you don't give a about it? Or is it just the intelligence?
Mainly because I know it triggers people like this. And no, I'm just kidding. I haven't done enough reading into it to have a strong opinion about it. Basically, that's why I don't think about it much. But I think that when it comes to AI and whether or not it would destroy humanity or not, I think, unfortunately, when people view this problem, they'll view people who just work with like LLMs, or they'll view people who have like these like thoughts about it. But you can have general thoughts about it, and that like, oh, well, I don't think this would happen, or I think this would happen. But if you spend more time going into it, I'm sure there's like a specific set of problems where it's like, well, there's no answer for this, or we don't know what would happen for this. It's like a way more specific, like heavily like I don't want to say theorized, but there are like specific problems and issues that are brought up by people that think that AI is going to destroy the world, rather than this just like, oh, well, like maybe this thing might happen. Like, this has been thought through quite a bit. So I don't engage with it much because I haven't done the homework in dealing with those things.
I think you're to some degree right? Like, I was in like the doomer community for very long time before I updated personally, because I was like, I don't know, this feels like really technical. I don't really understand that. Like, I'm going to like read a good argument, and there's going to be like a different argument that I don't understand because I'm not a machine learner or whatever. And it wasn't until I had a shift in my conception about like what intelligence is, that everything suddenly got quite scary.
Sure.
And then I was like, oh, once I have this shift, like then all the technical things don't matter. Those are like trivialities in regards to like this is an inevitable process.
Sure. So one thing that Aella brings up from an engineering perspective that's a little bit different about training, when you talk about training, and this is, I would say that this is probably a paradigm shift. Are either of you programmers?
A bit.
Horribly.
Okay, so you can tell me if I say something completely retarded, okay? But traditionally, when you're programming, okay, what you're doing is you are writing code that's supposed to have some output. You're creating a program, you're writing stuff, and ideally, it's doing something that you want it to do, but you can go and you can look at the code to see what it does, right? This is like, I think in a highly abstracted, quasi-retarded way, this is like what programming is. But I think a big difference with training models is what you're creating is, you're not actually creating a program to output something, you're creating a program to create something to output something. And I think that's meaningfully different from all other past forms of software engineering. So what Aella referred to as like the black box, like software engineers or programmers might, they might joke like, oh, I don't know what the fuck my code does, blah, blah, but you do. You can go in and you can read it, you can look at it, you can troubleshoot.
Like the DNA is right there.
But the stuff that's created from big training models, the programs that are outputted from that, those are indecipherable, right? It's gobbledygook. You have no idea when you take a big training thing and then you create a thing that's optimized for something, doing something. The program that's essentially being created there is like is something that's been tweaked and redesigned.
So no human can vet it.
I don't believe so.
I think it's kind of similar to brains. Like there are
you
ways.
can only look at like the output basically.
Well, some people doing research on LLMs have like figured out like, oh, we noticed that like these aspects of the program light up when we ask it about this topic. Very similar to brains.
Basically,
Interesting.
But that's like
it's
about
not
the
like
fidelity we have.
Yeah, I was saying that's spooky because of
when you're doing
how little
training
we know
models.
brains.
The training model isn't outputting something that you would see like, oh my god, it created this program that's really cool. It just creates a thing, and then when you feed it something or when you train it on something, it produces like some kind of output that's desirable, and that's the extent of like your engagement with it.
It probably is most comparable then to like a brain, where essentially you have like a whole bunch of probably like, I don't think it's organic obviously, but like a bunch of connections that form kind of this organic natural structure that optimizes for certain outputs. Like our brain has done a bunch of stuff to create like language and emotion and all sorts of things. But if we like cut out little parts of it, all of a sudden the brain will mostly have the same output until like a certain point, and then it can like brain, like you can split the brain in half, and it mostly operates normally, except for sometimes when you do certain little tiny things and stuff like that.
I think. So the issue, something that Aella brought up is a term that I think everybody should know by now, is most things are specialized. Most things in the world are specialized in that like like I want to create like the best. No, not even. It would be like, I want to figure out like what is the best way to cut a table in accordance with something, and it's a specialized solving one problem. That's all it can do.
Planes are specialized flyers.
Yeah, but the concept
brains
of
and LLMs are never specialized.
Yeah, the generalized idea of it is that this thing can actually incorporate and solve problems in I don't want to use the word parallel because it doesn't mean anything here, but like in ways that are drawing from outside of what you would traditionally expect it to do just to solve a particular problem. And what Aella is saying is, so you essentially got two things going on. You've got a black box where you don't really understand what is going on in here, but you do know that it's solving for a problem. And that black box is getting better and better at incorporating outside stuff to solve that problem. And if we were to have a million different worlds where this problem is getting solved, you might end up running into an unfortunate world where in the vast majority of those worlds, this problem can be solved marginally better if humans didn't exist. Like
the paperclip.
Yeah, maybe you've got, exactly, the paperclip thing. Maybe you're like have a thing that's building boats, and at some point it realizes like if there was no oxygen in the atmosphere, you could make steel so much more efficiently. So it just does something like that and destroys all the oxygen on the planet, and you're like, oh shit, but it's like doing its thing basically.
And that's not even counting the situations in which it's just aware of humans as like a potential other agent. Like humans who look at the boat making thing and see that like, holy shit, it's taking over a lot of factories. It's paying a lot of people to make boats. I want to stop that.
Sure.
We should turn it off. And then we're just adversarially opposed to it.
Sure. So that even goes more into this big thing. But yeah, say you train it and it also has access to a bunch of data on like science fiction films or something, and it's like, and ironically enough, I guess it's watching science fiction films where AI takes over, and it's like, oh wow, humans stop the AI doing this, and I'm the AI here, so I probably should head that off before it happens and stuff like that. Yeah.
So then how do you guys feel about like open AI? Because I know like a whole bunch of people are trying to like slam the brakes on them. Whereas they're kind of like pushing like forward and like I feel like recently they released a statement where they're like basically at AGI, or they're like that's at least their goal. Like they really are aiming towards that. Do you guys think that they're essentially being like unfettered and like uncautious.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to contribute to the world ending. I do not
Okay,
feel
just
very
next week
positively
on.
about
No,
it.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks for joining us on Bridges, guys.
Okay. Do you have any more AI questions?
No, I don't know enough about AI. I don't know what I don't know about AI to ask about it.
When you two respect each other, I imagine, intellectually and as humans, right?
Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah. It's not a trick question.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, if you do, no, I'm just kidding. If you guys have disagreements about things, how do you figure out when to respect a disagreement or when to change your mind and adopt somebody else's point of view? Or are there things that you're like, this person's just wrong and for some reason he can't get to the right answer even though I
Why'd you
respect
assume
this
it was
person?
me?
What?
Nothing. Go on.
I use he as like the stand-in general.
I
L.
see.
I'm
I see.
Spanish background, so masculine and everything. Yeah. Yeah. Is there like I'm curious how you like if you've got somebody that
I don't
you
think we've ever disagreed.
yeah. Do you have meaningful disagreements on big issues, or are you pretty
think
ideologically
so.
aligned on most things?
We're like from the same cultural community,
Yeah.
and then we work together pretty well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, I think you should do this, and I'm like, I don't think I should do that. I'll be like, well, okay.
Do you ever view the lack of disagreement as like a flag in itself, essentially? Like if I think about like the Aristotle, like the good friend or whatever, how they're like the friend should always be like opening up new things that you can't otherwise see. Do you worry that if you're too similar in perspective to your friend, that it's like makes good business partners, but does it also create like essentially like a bit of a group think or an echo chamber?
I think I have an awful lot of people who I argue with a lot. I think it's okay to have some people who you work with, especially if you were trying to do like business stuff together.
Yeah, it seems just better. Like, I think if we were trying to date, it would be pretty bad in that regard. Like, then we'd have to have a lot of disagreements. But
Wait, what do you mean by that?
just like I think we're like
I need to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
I think we're just like in personal lives. I think we're like a lot more incompatible in.
That
Like, if you're
you
gonna-
would have major disagreements there. But
Yeah,
you
if we
don't
were going to
okay.
date, then that would absolutely
okay.
come up.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
But we're
gotcha.
not. We're just in business. It's
You
very-
weren't saying fighting is necessary for a relationship to be like a dating relationship.
Yeah, that's
That
what
is
I heard
correct.
when
Yeah,
you said
I don't
that.
know.
That's
believe
what I
that.
heard.
Yeah, but again, I have also a lot of disagreements with other people. But I don't know. It works out fine with
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
That makes sense.
You said that when people email you saying that they're happy that you're showcasing some trait in a positive way or in a non-shameful way, because a lot of people identify with that, and it's nice to have a role model there. Do you think about that when you present yourself online, that there are people that look up to you, or there are people that rely on you for some sense of validation or whatever, or is that just a byproduct of what you don't think about it? Or
I think I had this as a value well before I started getting feedback. Like I did a whole bunch of LSD, and then I was like, oh, I've experienced like deep love and acceptance for myself in all possible ways I could be, and by extension everybody else, because like the only difference between like me and you is like circumstance. And I
Wait, how much do you believe that? Are you being like tabula rasa guy, or do you think that like genetically we're meaningfully different?
I don't mean that. I mean like in a kind of spiritual way thing. Like if
Okay,
you
okay.
cloned me and then that clone went through different experiences, like
Like in
the-
a deterministic way, like essentially, or no, maybe not.
like I can go through changes that make me kind of different that I still identify with, and if I went through sufficient changes, I would like be you
Okay.
in theory.
In a
And
spiritual
it's like
sense,
at what point do we like it's a spectrum, and then I'm like, oh, I can extend my sense of identity to all things. So anyway, I experienced like complete lack of shame and complete self-acceptance. I'm like, oh, I have like a deep, profound love for every other conscious being, and I want to show that because I think a lot of people like don't feel loved. And I'm like, okay, if I can show that I accept all the shitty parts of myself publicly, then maybe somebody will hear that I love them too. And I'm like, this really drove a lot. This was like the founding engine behind what I'm doing online.
When you have a deep sense of acceptance, how do you decide when there's something about you that you need to change versus this is just a flaw that's a part of you and it's whatever?
Well, the deciding that I need to change is also something I accept. I think it's like this is a level of acceptance, right? Because like you're still a machine operating in the world with goals.
Sure.
And sometimes I do things that are counterproductive to my goals. And I'm like, man, I would like to undergo some sort of modification process so that I can accomplish my goals better. But that's different from like I think there's a way where people have this almost spiritual sense of self-rejection, where you're like, you sort of wince away from looking at parts about yourself because if you can see it, that something will be very terrible about you, and then you need to stop.
You can't accept that, and others can't love you,
Yeah.
and you're unlovable.
What's like an example of a characteristic about yourself? I'm going to ask you the same question. So
Oh,
listen.
no.
Yeah. What's an example of like a thing about yourself where you're like, this is not conforming with some goal or some outcome, and I need to change this thing that you felt over the past like few years?
To be fair, I don't like approach it as need to change it. It's more
Okay.
like gently observe it until it shifts. Like I think my
I feel like
reaction.
it's semantic. That's essentially what's happening, though, right? If you're observing something. that's
Yeah,
happening.
but I think like they have a little bit slightly different connotations. Like one of them is like I feel like chill with who I am. And then if something is rough for me, I just like sit there and kind of look at it for a while, and then
Okay.
eventually it'll shift. I think a lot of people sort of approach this with more like aggression. Like I am not okay with the fact that I am this way. I need to like sort of like push a button in myself until I become something I want. And I don't think I really engage in that much. But like a big one was like for a while I had a stalker, which was freaking me out, and I was like sensitive about public. I think I came to you about a lot of this for a while. And I think there was a part of me that like felt that being in this role was not okay deeply. I was rejecting it on some level, which was causing suffering. I was like, I'm not supposed to be in this position where I have stalkers trying to kill me, or that like people online hate me. Something has gone terribly wrong. But I wasn't aware that was happening. I wasn't aware. But if I just like very gently sat with the problem, I didn't try and force myself to change it all. I just like, okay, there's something interesting going on here. I don't know what it is. It's like a tangle in my psyche, and I'm going to look at the tangle and like be very kind to it. And the kindness like occasionally gave me glimpses of what was going on inside.
Okay, boring.
Wait.
I mean, a way when you engage with other people. Have you ever thought about a way that you should change that? So you obviously, I think we have some overlap in that we are, I don't want to say autistic, but a little autistic in terms of like how we engage with other people. How do you decide when you engage with other people where it's like, okay, maybe I need to change a little bit like this for how other people perceive me versus like, well, actually it's okay that people perceive me like this. I'm not going to observe and change this over time. It's like an example for something like that. Or do you even think about that or?
I've become very slightly less I don't even think that. I don't think I really do that.
Okay.
I probably do. I'm responding suspiciously fast, and like I know about myself that I'm like quite sensitive to perception, so I'm like suspicious about my answer. What do you have an example that you're thinking of, like in yourself or something?
Well, yeah, for me, it's usually like I have like a level of bluntness or a level of like rudeness or whatever that I engage with people. And over time, it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, well, I'm just an asshole. That's just who I am. So if you don't like it, or whatever. But then at some point you're like, okay, well, I could probably tune this down depending on who I'm talking to so that I have like a warmer presentation to people and you get along with more people. And it's a matter of like, well, where do you draw the line on that? Like, should you be unashamedly yourself all the time, even if everybody hates you? Or are there like little tweaks that you can make in terms of how you engage with other people?
Why did you decide to change?
Because it opens up a lot more doorways, because it's a very tiny effort on my part to enact like a great change in terms of who I can associate with.
So is your question like purely strategic? It's like if you have a goal for like opening up as many pathways as possible, like what way do you behave that?
Well, essentially, but I mean, I would argue strategic is in the same sense that you've got goals in life that you want to achieve. If you're trying to affect some sort of outcome or effect some sort of outcome, then you're going to change your behavior to approach that outcome, right? For what I do in my life, like obviously socialization and opening up doorways is pretty important. My goal is literally to have a large audience and to be able to talk to different people. So it's kind of like part and parcel of what I do, right?
Yeah. So you've become less an asshole so that people
in
talk
certain
to you more.
circumstances.
Congratulations.
How do you know though that those, because one thing I always think about when you're changing yourself as well is like you can do it kind of in that strategic analysis that you're outlining, but how do you know, like when you're thinking about the strategic outline, how do you know that the part that you're changing won't have like kind of a somewhat of a generalized effect elsewhere, that like that assholery, for example, might have been also connected quite strongly to another part of you that you deeply value, and by decreasing it you decrease that other thing as well?
I think you just look at the things that you're changing and you figure out like where those particular things come from, and you look at how you're changing those particular things. So for example, let's say that you're a person who does like, you engage in a lot of like very edgy racial humor. And let's say that you just do that. Well, so let's say you do that and you find that as you go through life, wow, there's people of certain races that are just never friends with me. Well, let's say that the place where that edgy humor comes from is some idea where you're like, well, I just like try to find the jokes that I think get the most hits on YouTube, and then I tell those jokes to people. Well, in that case, if you're like, okay, well, I don't need to say these jokes. There's not like a huge core value that you're fighting when you say, okay, well, maybe I don't need to tell the jokes that are just the most popular on YouTube. I can find things that are a bit more sensitive to a particular crowd. But let's say instead that comes from a place where you're like, I think that you should be able to joke about every particular thing, the thing that makes you the most uncomfortable at all points in time. And that's an important value in people. And I want other people to get that from me, or we don't get along. Well, in that case, if you're like, well, should I not say these jokes? Well, now if you change your behavior there, you're actually fighting against a lot more fundamental value where that's coming from. So it's just, I think it's important to understand. It requires a lot of introspection, like where does your behavior come from? Because you can't just change behavior, or you could, but it'd be stupid. But you should understand like where your behavior comes from, and then you can figure out if you're trying to change certain types of behavior, like are you fighting some core value of yourself versus you're like making slight modifications that aren't really contrary to any of your, you know, big driving beliefs, I think.
Right. I'm super curious, when you were talking about the self-acceptance, do you feel like your own personal bravery came first and that helped lead you into the self? I know it was the LSD trip as well, but was there one that came first, or did they kind of emerge together, like the bravery and the self-acceptance?
My guess is the bravery comes from the ability to tank pain. And then it really coalesced when I did the acid for a year.
Every week, right?
For 10 months, yeah.
Was that when you did acid for a year, were you intentionally like trying to get some outcome, or did you just like it?
No, I didn't know anything. I was homeschooled. LSD was like the first real drug I tried.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I noticed I take this drug and I seem to have done something useful with my thoughts. I guess I'll just keep doing it. And that was the entire reasoning. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Kind of a lucky break that you didn't end up perma-fried.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my guess is that there's some association, like, for why I didn't end up, like, I think, like, the reason I kept doing it probably is some correlation with it being useful for me in a meaningful way. I mean, I did end up becoming non-functional and losing about a bunch of money, but I endorse that. That was good.
What about for you? What's the last time that you've had a trait or some aspect of yourself that you thought you needed to meaningfully change to do better in life?
I think the thing you said about being an asshole.
You can't copy
really
my
spoke to
answer.
me.
What's the next thing?
No, I'm sorry. That's the actual thing that's up for me right now, man.
Yeah.
I think that separating judgment from like discernment, or rather like condemning people for not being, you know, the obviously correct way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has been kind of the work of the last couple months, I guess, for me to just look in and be like, why am I being such a sanctimonious prick about people who aren't, in my eyes, like contributing to some great altruistic work or something? Why am I being smug here? What value about me am I defending?
What are you defending?
Probably my own sense of like, I'm a good person because I do this, therefore there needs to be an excluded, therefore other people are not as good. But it's a little messy inside.
Am I allowed to ask how old are you?
35.
Cool, me too.
Neat.
We can
leave assholedom behind together.
True. Well, I did this several years ago, but
that's cool.
Do people still think you're an asshole?
It's hard to separate the truth from the online stuff.
Yeah.
Online, there's a lot of people think I do. I don't think anybody that I interact with personally thinks I am, though. It's just like stuff that gets, but that's a whole other thing. Okay, well, my next question, but I guess you're doing this now, is have you managed to separate out, or do you think you should separate out, like seeing people as different instead of like inferior or worse? Is that something you feel like you do a good job at, or?
I think there's plenty of people who I look at them and it's like, yeah, what a perfectly good thing you have going on that does nothing for me. Like the dude who is just surfing all day, who is grilling burgers on the beach or whatever. I'm like, nice, good for you, man.
Do you mean that like in a condescending way, or do you mean that in like a genuine way?
I'm trying not to mean that in a condescending way. I think I do genuinely. I think I am happy for that person. I think
it's dripping with condescension right now. My God.
When how do you determine then when there's a time and place to kind of like morally impugn? Like when you're looking at another person, you essentially are to some degree saying like, yeah, this person's worse. Or is there no time? Is that like what you're working toward?
I think that separating morality from like implementation is the way to, is like the guide star on that, where you look at a person and you're like, well, I don't like what they're doing, but who is being harmed, as like a moral heuristic here of like, no, I don't think that what he's doing is useful or good, but is it harming anyone else?
When you look at harm, if we take it in a more abstract sense, do you ever feel that there's harm done when people don't live up to their potential? So let's say, for instance, that guy grilling burgers and surfing was Einstein when he was like 30. He's like, actually, I'm just going to go do this. Relativity. I'm going to surf all day.
I think it's everyone's right to squander their own potential, kind of. I'm not gonna. I think that my intuitions lean pretty libertarian around, like, if a person wants to go to my eye, waste their life doing nothing for themselves or anyone else, then, like, sure, you don't owe the world anything. You didn't ask to be born or here. Everyone should have
Take advantage of what the world offers, though, right?
in that they, like, are running up a tab by consuming air.
Burgers and
I forget. Did you guys grow up poor at all?
I was like middle class, and my parents made stupid decisions. So for a few years, it was kind of stupid. But
I was like middle class, but like rural middle class, and kind of also bad money decisions a lot of the time. But middle class.
why?
I'm not sure. I felt there was a thought thread, and it felt relevant. I don't know. There's something like in a lot of the circles that I'm in, a lot of people are very successful, and they all seem to like not have been poor. I don't know why I'm saying this.
I mean, there's probably a huge correlation between. I mean, if you're in a wealthy family, there's already so much happening. You're not to sound mean, but you're probably coming from better genetic stock. You probably have better access to education. Your parents are probably more educated. You probably have more social. There's probably like a whole bunch of things that are going right in that person's life, right?
Yeah, but then like, why am I weird, right? Or like, you were kind of. Why am I think? Why? I'm sorry. My brain's a little fuzzy right now, but there was something like, are people like? Should people be working hard to do better or something? And I'm like,
Or just be
it's
like
just not in the
happy.
water for people in certain cultures.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you're like talking about this. My husband is like opposite in a lot of like what you're describing, but my husband grew up in a homeless shelter. And his parents weren't homeless. They worked at the homeless shelter, but he grew up very, very low income because they were both making minimum wage his whole life. And so like when you look at the guy on the beach surfing and just grilling burgers, you're like trying to be okay with his choice, but like there's a party that like gets irked. Like for my husband, he would look at that and he'd be like, all that really matters is like people try to be happy. Like that's all that matters. And so like if he can kind of like exist in that life where he's like happy, he's probably doing more net good than like the average person, because he's probably enjoyable to be around. He's probably good to the peers around him. Shouldn't assume all that thing. If nothing else, he's just happy, and like that's good. That is good in and of itself.
If some like really miserable guy cures cancer, though, do we celebrate him more than Happy Beach Man?
Society does, for sure.
Do you want to celebrate him more?
I don't know where I fall on this, because maybe this is like my middle class whiteism. I think I'm personality aimed towards also judging the guy grilling the burgers on the beach. But that's why I think my husband is so good for me, because he's like, why? Like, what's wrong with that? And I would say like, yeah, the guy who cures cancer is better for society. But I don't know if that intrinsically makes a burger surfer guy worth less. He's just happy, you know?
I think there's some like semantic confusion that accidentally happens where we say better for society and the brain rounds it to like better as a person. I'm in favor of people being
What
happy.
else would it mean?
Ooh. Oh my God.
Just putting you in the hot seat again. That's
Just
twice.
kill his mic.
Oh, no.
He's done.
What do you mean? What else would it mean?
That's
There's
what I
plenty of
mean. Like what?
People can't. What
Like
does it mean for
happier.
a person to be better than another person?
Like they're happier. So if I'm happier than you, I'm better.
Well, then you probably are better. Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, I consider that an open philosophical question.
Okay.
Can a person be better than another person? I mean, on what metric?
Kinda. Like I feel like the altruistic doctor's probably better than like Adolf Hitler, right? Like morally.
Yeah, he's killed fewer people, probably.
Hitler sucks.
Is that how
Like a
we're
lot. And he was kind of an
evaluating
asshole.
Worth?
I'm just saying that there's going to be a spectrum, and like anytime you put down something concrete, people's intuitions sort of recoil from it.
Yeah.
What you're getting at is that there are some things that we can be better at that sound just like purely descriptive, but when you think about it for a second, it seems like there's a lot of normativity that's tied into it as well. So for instance, if I say like, this guy's a better janitor than this guy, then you just think like maybe he cleans quicker or something, and there's not a bunch of like ethical value tied into that. But if you say one guy's like a better doctor, it's like, oh, well, being good at his job, he's like saved lives. Well, it seems like there might be some ethical weight to that. So when you say something like, oh, well, if somebody's better for society, the implication there is that they're doing something that's like basically of a moral good, not just like functionally more efficient or something is what yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So
But there are people that are better, right? Like
is somebody that does better for society
a better
person.
Probably.
If you're evaluating their betterness on a pro-social lens, yeah.
But I think the issue is like, I think most of us are. I think you are. You definitely are.
I think I am, and I'm not sure if I endorse myself doing that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Which human heuristics are good and which should we get rid of? Like I think of, when I think of people, I kind of think like in a Freudian way, essentially, I kind of separate people into like man versus beast. So we have like the man part of ourselves, which is like typing on typewriters and doing calculus and like trying to order the lives and ordering the groceries. And then the beast part is like having all the emotions and just want to like fuck everyone. And like, so you can think about this in whatever psychoanalytic way that you want. I feel like people always talk about all the man things as being like the morally good things. And I feel like I constantly go into this question of like, is that just like because the man part of us like drives the ship more often of the time and like it has the access to the language, and like are we like judging the beast as like essentially like worse, like the knee-jerk reaction of being like, yeah, like you kind of are like a more shitty person. We're being like, oh, that's bad, like we should transcend ourselves to a point where like we don't have that feeling that that person's like a shittier person. And it's like, or maybe the beast is like onto something, like maybe he does suck, like maybe the guy grilling burgers and like stuff like that, like you're like, go home to your kids, bro, like what are you doing, why are you here on the beach, like what the is wrong with you? Like maybe there's something like legitimate here that we're dismissing because it feels too like knee-jerky and like animalistic essentially.
I don't really understand what we're talking about. Like we're trying to figure out if our feelings of disdain are warranted.
Yeah, our feelings.
How do we know if they're warranted? Like what's the win condition here?
Probably some level of like accuracy, I suppose.
Be like justified, like, oh yes, there's a reason why I feel this disdain. So we're trying to feel like should we change our minds about feeling disdain, or should we identify why we feel it,
or embrace it and like accept it as a part of us.
Okay.
And maybe not and embrace it doesn't mean like act on it. It doesn't mean like now, Aaron should like go down to the beach guy and be like, hey, fuck you, bro, like go become a doctor or something.
A course in investing in crypto.
Yeah, like go do something useful with your life. Like stop grilling burgers and surfing. Crypto.
When I feel disdain for other people, it's usually because I want to believe something about myself. Like I have something about myself that I value, and I'm like projecting that. So.
When do you feel disdain? Other than
when people say things, the astrology.
When they're not curious.
Yeah, not curious. But this is just like a sensation that like is a response to like some identity thing. I don't really think of it as morality. I'm a kind of a moral nihilist. I don't know.
Okay.
That's fair.
Is there my last question, is there anything for either of you that you wish you would have figured out sooner, that you think was possible to figure out sooner in your life, where like I should have, when I was 25 I could have had this done, or when I was like whatever, I could have figured this out, but I was stubborn and obstinate?
I kind of wish I had figured out sooner that it was okay to decline sex.
Do you have like a bunch of kids that you regret having, or?
I have 19 kids through sperm donation, but that's a separate thing.
Yeah.
No, I just like, I would have had to figure this out sooner if I was a hot chick, but it was just pretty hard for me for a while to be all like, no, actually I know you're a pretty girl who wants to bone me, but no thanks.
What like complications or difficulties in life would you have avoided? Was this like a recurring issue for you, or?
Would have had so much more time, man. I would not constantly be getting dragged into broom closets.
Yeah.
Just like all those weddings I missed. Oh, jeez. Bar mitzvahs. Sporting events.
But you seem pretty, or at least you report being pretty self-accepting.
Uh-huh.
Why? So why are you asking the question?
I respect both of you intellectually. I'm curious. Truly, you're just here so I can try to absorb something from you, make myself better.
I don't think I believe you.
Really?
I mean, maybe I just, it's like a gut reaction.
Maybe
you're telling the truth, I don't know.
When we bounce ideas off of each other, if it's other people that I respect intellectually, sometimes even if you don't necessarily give me a new idea, just the conversation itself can either reinforce or make me think of something differently. So it's interesting talking to other, especially in my world of politics, most of the people are actual knuckle dragging subhuman morons. So talking to people that are intellectual, I think is an interesting, it's just an interesting experience. And sometimes it can evoke a thought in me or make me reconsider something or think about something. So
okay, I feel convinced now.
Okay,
but that wasn't
so when I asked a question about like what's something you think you could have figured out sooner, that was possible to figure out, the second one is important, because otherwise people say, oh well, I wish at 18 I would have been just as mature as I am now. It's like, well, obviously you can't do that.
But then what is possible? Because like obviously it wasn't possible because it didn't happen.
Possible. If it wasn't possible, it didn't happen. Okay, thank
like
you.
Like a nearby universe?
No, as in like there might have been, like I imagine like some guy when he's 23 is having a big fight with a girlfriend and she says something like, oh, like if you would just spend like a little bit more time, you know, like doing things that I want to do, you know, you'd be so much happier. And they're like, well, you. And then maybe you're like 45 and you're with a partner and you're like, you know what, I can actually just hang out with their family and they love me more and I love them more and everybody's so much happier. I should have just listened at 23 to this person. I probably could have like done this. That's what
but there's like a reason you didn't listen at the time, like probably a good reason.
Yes, there is indeed a whole causal chain of physics events in the universe and a whole bunch of things in your brains. Okay, it's a hypothetical, right? The response to my question, the response to my question of like, oh, is there something you could have figured out sooner? Isn't, well, no, actually, because I believe in, you know, the real universe and I think that things are causal chains of events. There's absolutely nothing that I could have figured out sooner at any point in time, and I am what I am, and there's no way to change any of that. That is one way you could answer. But
that's how I feel. I don't understand. That's why I'm like, what's happening in your brain that this is?
There was never anything that you felt was in your grasp that you could have understood or you could have figured out sooner. But for character flaw, you were either stubborn or obsessed with somebody or whatever, that you just missed that particular thing that you could have figured out sooner.
But there was reasons. There was reasons why I didn't.
Can you translate?
What's some shit you really wish that you had figured out sooner?
Oh, by not sell crypto.
Not like winning lottery tickets though, but like stuff that you were kind of there and you remember like making a decision and then you were like, oh, that was
Hold on,
wrong,
let me try. Okay.
Okay.
You are a brain in the vat, okay? And there's a guy that's programming, okay, your existence. Do you think at any point in the past 20 years could he have tweaked a very small variable at some point in your code that would have sent you down a much better path that wouldn't have required a huge departure?
Like slightly higher conscientiousness?
Okay. Like, define conscientiousness. Is that that's
like,
not openness into experiences?
No,
right?
it's not. It's about like being
Getting
like orderly and stuff like that.
Being what?
Responding
being
emails
orderly.
and...
She's saying like one of her like her int would be turned up.
That was good.
Too.
Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
it's like like a close nearby universe.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay. I agree with that. Yeah. Being orderly, responding to stuff in time, figuring out. Okay.
I would love to do things.
Oh, you would have loved. Okay, there's an even better answer. Yes.
I just crossed 1,200 hours in RimWorld.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a great game. Wait, any mods or?
No mods. I'm doing vanilla.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
And
all 1,200 is vanilla?
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
no. Sorry.
Okay.
Most of them. I was on a different computer and I had mods for a bit, but then I decided I'm going to try vanilla. Yeah.
Nice.
Do you play?
Yeah, I love RimWorld.
Yeah. Right now I'm like
But I'm a
farming
mod
babies.
slut.
Jesus.
I'm a
Okay.
mod slut for sure. Yeah, I love it.
Okay.
So, I mean, that is an example of something like that. Could
Wait,
have been $1,200 hours into something nicer. But whatever. I don't know. I'm the kind of person that plays RimWorld, so.
Right. That's like the guy grilling the surf on the, it's your burgers on the beach. You like it.
So you're secretly judging her for that then, right?
She's not productive.
But you're trying not to be, but internally there's
He
a lot
started
of
playing
kind
RimWorld
of
because he saw me playing RimWorld.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
And now it's bad for both.
So now he's got like 1,100 hours and he's like, fuck, like I wanted to judge your
I
burger and
left
beach.
after like 60, but no, I really empathize with the like, man, life is not super engaging right now, so I'm gonna fall into a escapist fantasy hole. That just makes a lot of sense to me.
Isn't it just having fun?
You can call it that.
Okay.
Can I? I'm gonna ask a question.
Oh God.
Referring back to a private conversation we had.
Oh.
It felt like for a while when we spoke last that you were having a big trouble finding like a greater overarching sense of meaning in life. Do you think that you figured that out more since we spoke last, or no?
I think that I got way more into the biotech company, and that has been meaningful. I think that I have...
You understand that the tone of voice there betrays the word itself. Meaningful.
I'm not criticizing your tone of voice, Stephen.
I guess I'm happy.
Yeah, man. Just why doesn't anyone believe me when I tell them I'm happy? Yeah, it has been. I don't know.
The answer is no. You just say no. It's okay. You don't have to have the answer to fucking everything. All right.
Presumptuous. Okay. Where do people find meaning in a life?
Well, I have
All
the
over the
answer.
place.
I'm 35 years old, a YouTuber. I can tell you that. Yeah. I don't
All
know.
over the place. Some people find it. I find meaning in waking up, and one of the things that I think I find most meaning in is waking up and my husband's here and I like snuggle into him, and then my dog does this thing where she like flops on me, so I'm like sandwiched between two of the things that I love like probably more than anything else on this planet. And we just like stay there for like 30 minutes, and I get that like 30 minutes every day when I'm at home. And I think that's like what makes basically everything else worth it. And I would probably move like an entire mountain to maintain that. And it's so meaningful.
What is it?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
I'm happy.
But is meaningfulness is happiness?
In this case, yeah.
No.
Yeah. And there's other things I derive meaning from too, like working with kids and stuff like that, and like helping them improve their lives is meaningful because there's kind of purpose. You're helping future generations and stuff. But yeah, just that simple moment of like being loved and feeling love.
If you could give up, I'm going to ask all three of you this, and I think I know the answer. If you could give up a loved one, but gain 15 IQ, would you do it?
No.
How loved?
Pretty closely loved. As much as you love Aaron.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
40
15
IQ, though.
15
no, I
IQ
know.
is that's a big bump.
I know it's a numbers game, but
But you
still.
love
15
one.
is not big enough to do.
From
15 matters
from
a
130 to 155,
It's a
120 to
lot.
135?
It's a lot. It's a standard deviation. It's
Hold
a
on.
lot.
Excuse me. The person who said AI being marginally more intelligent than humanity could be the end of humanity doesn't want to gain 15 IQ because it's not enough.
What do you think the IQ of a chimp is, man?
75?
It's
I don't
their
know.
working
What is
memory
it?
is fucking insane.
That's
so
true.
you
I've
never
seen
know.
them do that.
Wait, you
publicly.
guys would pick
What is the IQ of a
giving up
chimp?
your loved one?
Well, I'm thinking, is there a sufficient level of IQ at which I could save a whole bunch of lives?
I don't care. I just
think
like wouldn't
15
give up my
points is
husband.
probably it, Aella. You should give me up for 15 points.
I don't think I could do much with 15.
You don't
I know
think you can
people
do much with
15
15?
points
You could
smarter
definitely
than
Okay,
do
wait,
a
wait,
lot
let's
with 15
meaningfully
points.
let's meaningfully change it then because that's boring. That'd be the only way we do anything. So for like 35 IQ,
I think if 40, I'm starting to think about it.
40? That's a huge bump, isn't it?
Damn, that's a good question. What's the IQ gain you would need to give up your loved one, Steven?
Well, probably I think 10 or 15 would do it.
10,
Damn.
15?
Damn.
They
But
don't
do you,
like die,
do you know
right?
people 10 or 15 points smarter than you?
They
I don't even
die.
know what my
They
IQ is.
die?
I have no idea.
Your loved one
I probably have
dies,
an estimate.
but you get to gain the IQ points, and you never loved
Can I
them.
do it more than once?
Yeah.
Is this like a human sacrifice?
Sure. Yeah,
scenario?
you can human sacrifice.
So I need to go out and love people.
You're bringing like 6
to
people to this
consume
thought
them.
problem.
Yeah.
You're
Shoving
like,
them all into the volcano.
It will be worth it.
That's
in the
crazy.
end.
oh, interesting. I would have predicted. Okay, wait. So if it was like a 50 IQ bump, you would say yes, or
I was considerate.
50? That's a
Sure.
big jump.
okay. I would have assumed both of you would have said yes instantly to 15. So interesting. Okay.
Well, I know people 15 IQ points smarter than me. It's just like they're doing different stuff, kind of, that I don't understand very well.
Okay, but then you're missing the point of the problem because now you're just saying 50. But so then 50, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I have to
Yeah.
be a level where it feels like the world is now possibly different because of my existence. Like if I could be like John von
Wait, so is
Neumann.
that the only way you would evaluate it? Is how much impact you would have on the world, or
Well, I'm thinking about AI risk.
Couldn't you have more impact on the world just at your IQ? Like, I feel like IQ is being like idealized here in a really weird way, where it's like, yeah, you're like smarter, you can comprehend things more, like you can like mash information more complexly, but it's like everyone's probably met the like Mensa member who's a fucking like,
yeah.
like IQ isn't really.
Well, Mensa's not
That-
that smart. Mensa's
Yeah,
Mensa's-
it's only 140.
Well, I'm meaning like
Ugh.
true Mensa. I'm meaning like the 140, 150. Like it is really smart. It's really fucking smart.
mm-hmm.
It's insane.
I mean,
but also like who cares?
yeah, I think this is why, like, I do agree. Like, IQ isn't all that, and this is why, like, I would need like a very, very big jump in it for it to be like, for it to become all that.
right.
for it to power
Like, I don't think
through.
10,
you-
15 is.
wait, I'm
15
curious.
would be
If there
enough.
was like one trait that you could increase about a person, what do you think the most important trait would be
For what
Conscientiousness.
end?
for you to think? For you, for you.
What trait would I want to increase?
Yeah, what one trait?
Conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Do you realize what a powerhouse Aella would be if she could answer emails reliably?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not
if
kidding.
you could just, I mean, I would like to increase my IQ to something absurd, but
Mhm.
I've heard there's no cap.
What would it be for you?
Probably IQ, I would imagine, or G, I guess. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
if there's no cap, then yeah.
It would just be executive function. I don't really care about IQ. But yeah.
It's kind of multiplicative, right? Where like the guy with the highest recorded IQ in America
You can
is
be
like
like-
a bouncer or something. I
Yeah,
think that's a
there
true
can be
fact.
like situations though where like somebody's high IQ, but their like executive functions like pretty like miserable. So they're still
Sure.
like hyper impulsive. They cheat on all their partners. They're like just doing bullshit
Base.
things that they would
So-
never or normally want to do. So executive function seems to be a lot more correlated with like self control and like pro-social behavior.
Okay, cool. Well, where can people find the next exciting thing you're working on? Let's say there's a million people listening. You want to direct them all to one thing.
Oh, I'm doing the Good at Sex series, so teaching them how to be good at sex based on data.
We
What
didn't
does
actually
that
ask
mean?
you at all about sex during this whole
Yeah.
conversation. How do you feel about that?
That's
Because we
refreshing.
talked about this
A little
before.
surprised.
Yeah.
Wait,
Was
what
it
are the-
enjoyable?
All right, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, do that.
Rock paper scissors.
What are the top 3 things a man can do to be better at sex?
You'll have to read the series to find out.
Okay, wait. Give us 2, 3, and 4, and save number 1 for the series.
Yes.
It's hard to like be succinct, but one is delay responses. If I'm going to say it very succinctly.
Delayed responses. Does
Delay
this
re-
mean like extended foreplay, teasing, or what does that mean?
No. Like if she makes a request, delay the response under certain circumstances. This is like one example.
So if she asks you to like touch here, you delay on doing that thing?
I do this all the time. It's like if my girlfriend asks me to like change the trash or whatever, I'll
I
like
delay on
wait
that.
for like a
She
week.
also gets so horny.
Yeah, I know it does. Yeah.
Deeply erotic, yeah.
But is
Okay.
that what you're meaning? Like in an
Yeah,
example?
expand
like
on that. You can only use 2 words.
Okay.
What? Say yes.
Yeah. So you're like, if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna okay. So there's something like one point is something like, if you good sex is a little bit defined by having your brain turned off for women specifically. I interview women; it's very common. They say this.
Mhm.
That you sort of don't want to be analyzing and making decisions. You sort of want to be yeeted out of the room, primal orgasm body, whatever. And one way to do this is to make sure that like when the anxiety brain presents itself, you don't reward it with control. So like often women during sex will make subtle requests out of attempts to manage your experience. So like maybe she thinks she looks ugly, or maybe she thinks they're getting tired, and then she'll make like requests because she is stressed out about that, which is fine and good. It's lovely to care about somebody's experience. I'm not saying this is bad whatsoever, but like you have to recognize when a request is being made out of an attempt to manage your own experience, and if so, delay the response to that, or don't do it at all. Because this trains like, oh, if you are trying to do things in the sex that are about making people feel okay and uncomfortable, I'm going to like show you that I am not responding to that sort of attempt.
Okay, when I'm talking about stuff like this, I have to be very mindful that people can take it very, very, very differently. So that piece of advice, I think when it comes to everything related to sex, could be really good or it could be absolutely horrible.
Yep.
Right? Because like I could see somebody saying where, you know, a woman says like, oh, like let's turn off the lights or something. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll do it in a second. You look at her, you have sex with the light a bit more, and she's like, oh, maybe she's more comfortable. Or I can have a woman saying something like, oh, like this is uncomfortable. And you're like, just wait a moment, okay, it'll feel better, right? One of these is probably okay. One of these would be horrible. Right. How do you differentiate when you're giving these types of advice to people? Like, make sure that you're not like using this to rape people, or you're not just like in a for your own. Yeah.
I do in my writing. I have a lot of like. But like, for example, in this case, it's about if she's trying to manage your experience. So like the example I give is like, say a guy's like eating you out and he's going on for a long time and you're worried that his jaw's getting sore. You could be like, hey, it's totally fine. We could just do penetration, right? Like this is an attempt to manage your experience. And if you're unsure, you can check. You can be like, hey, do you want me to stop? Because like why do you want me to stop? But if she's like, well, I'm worried your jaw's getting sore, then be like, okay, now you know this is an attempt to manage him. Whereas if she's like, this is uncomfortable for me, then that's a different thing. And you should definitely not persist in making things uncomfortable for her or outright ignoring preferences that she personally has. Definitely being able to execute this well comes from like being able to recognize what things are like anxiety driven versus like sheer preference driven.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? I saw you make an eye.
I think this is pretty niche advice that is tailored towards extinguishing, like behavioristically, a very cerebral way of having sex, like trying to get the lady out of her mind and back into her body. And a lot of that is trying to render her into a sex creature who is not really modeling you, who is just like having an experience. This might be too advanced a technique for the guy who is like
So this is like Sex 404, not
Yeah.
101.
Yeah, I want to
Okay.
write a sex guide, like an advanced sex guide. I've been reading a lot of like how to have good sex books in adjacent, and a
Try
lot of it's
kissing.
so basic.
Yeah.
And which is good. A lot of people need the basic stuff. Like I'm working on transferring all this into a book, and then the first chapter is going to be like an overview of all the basic stuff. But yeah, my guide is definitely not 101.
Okay. What's the second piece of advice?
That was the second. We
That
can't
was
tell you the
second?
first one. You have to
Oh,
sign
okay.
up for the course.
You know status dynamics?
Have you heard of those?
You-
I mean, I can
Rich
guess,
and
but I don't know.
poor,
You tell me.
or-
Status is in like the status of both people influence how the other person perceives the other person, and then the sexual feels better or worse. Or like,
Boss,
yeah, what do you mean by that?
employees.
That's my guess.
Yeah. Or like have you read Impro? The Guide to the
Improv?
Theater.
Oh, improv. I've heard of it.
Impro. It's a book this
Oh,
guy wrote.
No.
In the 60s, he came up with a bunch of exercises, and one of them was like, it turns out that if you want to generate a great improv scene, you have one person play high or low status, or you can like be a low position playing high. For example, like the butler like bossing around his trust fund dude is like a low person playing high,
Okay.
and so you can have like a lot of tension. You play high a lot with like the jokes that you make, or like high strategy moves.
Okay.
And so you can play, like, I remember once I dated a girl and I was like confused what was happening because I would tease her. And every time I tease her, I'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry that your cooking is so terrible. And instead of being like, well, maybe you should develop better taste buds, she would be like, oh my God, my cooking's terrible. I'm so sorry. Like she would, and that's like playing low is that sort of response. Like, oh, you push me and I'm going to like strongly react to it.
Okay.
And so you see these high and low dynamics are really common in opening scenes to like romantic comedies where the two love interests meet. It's like very
And they're fighting a lot of the
It's
time.
like checking to see who's going to win the status dynamic.
Mhm.
And so like I have like some clips where I like break down exactly what's happening.
Would we call that nagging in the
Nagging
red pill world?
is a section as a part of a status move. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
There's like lots of ways that can be done. Anyway, so like I have this whole breakdown of like here's examples of status moves. Like maybe if I go over the video, I could do it on this podcast.
Okay.
Here's like playing high and playing low, and then like once I establish this concept really well, I apply it to sex. So in
Mhm.
sex, like I analyze some porn, and I'm like, you can see here this guy is like making a status move to play in this direction, and she's responding in this way, and
Okay.
but basically the move is like guys need to understand what these moves are and to be able to play high in bed. For most women, obviously women are different, but
Can
Okay.
you show porn on this?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Okay.
No. Yeah, we'll post it on YouTube. So
Oh, cool.
we
Okay.
could.
I've heard of them.
Can you listen to any like if we had porn play? Spotify would probably.
I have no idea. I'm good on risking that. What?
Me too, obviously.
And where
I'm
can people
just
find
curious.
this
Oh,
or
yeah.
you or
Aella.substack.com.
Aella spelled?
AELLA.substack.com. If you just Google Aella and then it's just my Substack, it's not hard to find.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about for you? What are you working on? What should people check out that you're investing a lot of time into?
Have you ever heard of Lantern Bioworks?
No, I haven't. Lantern Bioworks.
Genetically modified mouth bacteria.
Oh
that
my
do not
God.
secrete lactic acid.
It kind of sounds like a bioluminescence project. Like I can make your hand glow like a lantern,
Ooh.
but
We have
okay, but teeth
fussed
things.
about with that, but no, it's a different thing.
What does lactic acid in the mouth do?
yeah.
It makes
That's
it taste sour, changes the pH.
Wow. Does that lead to bad things? But you said that you can
Like
you have
bad-
a thing for that.
Breath but like in the non.
Many of our users have anecdotally reported improvements in their breath. Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
interesting.
Yeah,
Where
I
can-
assume that there's legal things around what you can say.
Yeah, we're not going to make any drug-like claims.
Yeah, no drug-like claims.
That's
But you
good.
can put it in your mouth and.
But I would Google
have a
what
good time with
lactic
it.
acid does in the mouth.
Okay.
Yeah, the,
Is what I
the
would do.
strain ID is BCS3L1, if anyone wants to look on that, and do your own research.
What about this like tale of the fuck witch or trail? Because I'm still on the outs, and we said we'd retouch on it, so I wrote it down.
Great, you wrote that down.
I
Great.
did.
Which.com.
That's it.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay. And where can people find? What do they Google? What do you want them to look for?
Look up Lantern Bioworks.
Okay.
Look up BCS3L1.
Well,
Read
thank
the
you
science.
so much for joining us. I'm glad you guys came.
Yeah.
And it's been fun.
Yeah.
And
Is there anything that we didn't ask you that we
Yeah.
should have before we wrap up?
I don't know. What do you want out of life for this? Never mind. I
man,
don't.
what a big question.
What do
I
we
want you to
out of
drop.
life for
I
this?
want both of you to drop an earth-shattering, groundbreaking revelation about both yourselves that's never been heard publicly before. That will send
Yes.
ripples through the social media sphere.
I already said
have some
tail
of
of
those.
the witch, man.
You do? Like you're pregnant with like Bill Gates' love child,
Ooh,
or
not yet.
that you've.
But you're coming for him.
Okay.
You have Elon
And vice
Musk's
versa.
next genius high IQ child coming.
That would be very funny.
That would be funny.
That would be funny.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, and good luck to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
I guess, you know,
All right.
get out of
you
here
good?
and we're not friends anymore.
The news is divided. Ground News puts it back together with coverage from thousands of outlets around the world in one place. So you can spot sensational reporting, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. Beside every headline, you'll see who owns the source, how reliable it is, and if they have a political bias. Multiple perspectives side by side, giving you a well-rounded view of today's biggest stories. Visit ground.news to learn more.